All right, yeah, I think we're good to go. Right, welcome everyone for our second webinar series organized by the Center for Canadian Studies. We had one a week ago on Karbi studies, so this time we wanted to focus a little closer home, which is Santali studies, and what better way but to go to Shidukanu University with our wonderful colleagues, with many of whom we've already had ongoing conversations. So I think this is a very good beginning that we are having, and we hope that this conversation will go on, and especially with respect to contemporary events that have happened, which we would express in a short while. I think it's very important to have this kind of intervention right now, to actually have discussions and see what is possible to think in terms of liminality of space and the pedagogic experience, in terms of our learnings, in terms of how we perceive the idea of indigeneity in general. So we'll have multiple papers today from very young scholars. We will also have papers from very seasoned academicians, professionals who have been in the field, and I think that will take us to a different degree of understanding indigeneity from various aspects. So I will request Sucharita Di to do the honors. Sucharita Di?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we shall begin with Thakur Prasad Murmu, Debasri.
Yes, we would express our solidarity.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Because under the circumstances about the recent bearings which Debasri has already referred to, the atrocity that one of our colleagues had to face, we would like to stand in solidarity with her, and that's something that Debasri and I spoke about a while ago, that should mark the beginning of today's event. Actually,
yes,
we want to put it on record that we stand in solidarity with our colleague, and we pledge that we will not put up with or encourage such atrocities in any field, not just academia, in any field. Okay. So on that note, let's move on. I would begin with Thakur Prasad Murmu, who's an assistant professor at the Department of Santali, Sidhu Kanu Birsa University, Purulia. He's a creative artist and activist who has worked extensively in the field of indigenous studies with a focus on Santali. And may I request him to make his presentation. And I would also request all those who are not speaking to keep themselves on mute so that there's no echo.
ठाकुर प्रसाद जी, आप बोल सकते हैं अभी. आपको अनम्यूट करना होगा. आपका कनेक्शन ठीक है? सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है.
हेलो
हेलो प्रोफेसर मुर्मू, सुनाई नहीं दे रहा आपकी बात. You must have lost connection, Sucharita.
Yeah, because I can't.
No, I can see that.
There again.
He is there. आपको सुनाई दे रहा है हमारी बात? तो आप शुरू कर सकते हैं. हाँ, तो आप बोलिए. ओके.
नमस्कार, मैं ठाकुर प्रसाद हूँ. मैं संताली पेर प्रोफेसर छत्तर madam? Hello? সেটা কি
सुनाई नहीं दे रहा थी।
আছি
Debashri, I just told him,
Okay.
passed on the message that we
Thank
can't
you.
hear clearly.
Yeah. So shall we continue to the next speaker, and when he's better, then is back. आप अगर वीडियो बंद कर दे तो शायद बेहतर सुनाई देगा.
Should we move over to?
Hello?
Hello?
हाँ बोलिए.
बोलिए.
हाँ जोहार. सुनाई दे रहा है आवाज मैडम?
जी बिल्कुल.
हमें सावताली काव्यर সম্বন্ধে কাব্যের প্রবণতা সম্বন্ধে একটা ছোট্ট তৈরি করেছি. যেহেতু এখানে আমি গ্রামে আছি, বিশেষ রেফারেন্স বই নয়, তা সত্ত্বেও সান্তালি কাব্যের প্রবণতা দেখতে গেলে মানে 3 প্রকারের পাওয়া যায়. বিষয়গত, মতামতগত আর শৈলীগত. বিষয়গত মহিলা সৌন্দর্য এবং প্রেমের দৃষ্টান্ত. 2 প্রকৃতি এবং প্রেম সৌন্দর্য প্রকাশ. 3 অবিপ্রাকৃতিক প্রেম ও রহস্যবাদ. মতামত দর্শন মতামত প্রবণতায় দর্শন, ধর্ম, সমাজ, রাজনীতি, পারিবারিক ও বিবাহিত প্রধান. শৈলীগত প্রবণতায় মুক্ত গান, প্রতীক, চিত্রের ব্যবহার, দেশি ও বিদেশি শব্দের স্থান. সামূহিক সংবেদনশীলতা, সঙ্গীত, সংক্ষিপ্ত. এর মধ্যে কিছু এক্সাম্পল একটা দিয়েছি দর্শনের জন্য. এটা পণ্ডিত রঘুনাথ মুর্মুর গান. চাঁদমুঙ্গা মানাও লেখান মনে মতুর বড়ি বুগে সহায় মতো বিষ প্রচুর अकिल दिस हुस हुदिस्ते सनाम गे रेंगे বয়ান যত কথা লিডু চতায়. অর্থাৎ মন সুস্থ জ্ঞান বিচার বিবেচনা দ্বারা সব বিশ্বাস রাখতে হবে. তার ফল আমার
I think we've lost Professor Murmu again. Voice is breaking due to connectivity issues.
Yeah. I also,
What should we do?
yeah.
Maybe
No, he is
Bharat
there.
Disam
His
Talare,
voice is breaking. See, he is
Bharat
there,
Disam
but
Talare, Ar Mena, Bola Dada, Adi Sangegi, Assam Khon, Ehop Kate, Bengal Bihar, Saite, Odisha Habi, Nit Likagi, ভারতবর্ষের মধ্যে আমরা আদিবাসী রয়েছি যথেষ্ট সংখ্যায় আসাম থেকে বিহার বেঙ্গল উড়িষ্যা সর্বত্র একই রকম আমার এই ছোট্ট প্রস্তুতি এখানে শেষ করছি সবাইকে আরো জোহার নমস্কার हेलो मैडम सुनाई दे रहा है
thank you,
Hello?
Professor Murmu. Thank you, Professor Murmu.
दिक्कत हो रहा है कट जा रहा है कट रहा है ये कनेक्शन
We are now moving over.
हाँ मैडम
হ্যাঁ
हाँ बोलून
আপনি না আপনার যেটা বলেছেন
হ্যাঁ
ওইটা একটা আমাকে ছবি তুলে হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ করে দিন তাহলে আমি এখান থেকে কাউকে দিয়ে পড়িয়ে দিতে পারবো মানে পরিষ্কার সবাই শুনতে পায়নি তো সেই জন্য
ঠিক আছে ম্যাডাম
একটা ছবি তুলে পাঠিয়ে দিন
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে আমি পাঠিয়ে দেব
Thank you, Professor Murmu. Thank you, Professor Murmu. I am sorry, but it's because of the connectivity. We could not hear you very clearly. কিন্তু কিছুটা শুনতে পেরেছি আমরা আর Nivedita, I think you are doing something to share a bit of it with us.
Yeah, Sucharita Di, I have requested him to send a screenshot of his lecture if possible, and one of my students will share it with the
Wonderful.
listeners over here.
Wonderful. So
That's
meanwhile,
yeah,
we move on to Sudeep Bhui.
Yes, madam. Respected chairperson.
Sudeep Bhui is
and-
an assistant professor,
Yes, madam.
Department of Anthropology and Tribal Studies, coordinator, head in charge of Department of Chou, and coordinator, Center for Indigenous Studies, Sidhu Kanu Birsha University, Purulia. He has teaching experience of more than 14 years in regular and open system. He has received his PhD degree in medical anthropology with degrees in social cultural anthropology and social anthropology as well. His research interest, originated as native of Jungle Mahal, covers a vast area of tribal ethnography, ethnomedicine, indigenous knowledge, performing arts, show dance, folk media, and communication. Especially, he is doing his field work in Eastern India. He composed 3 books as co-author, edited 3 books, and published more than 32 research articles. He has completed 2 research projects, one on show dance. He is careful to incorporate his research and academic inputs in community services through NSS Cell. He is the program coordinator of that, and in association with a number of civil societies. Over to you.
Thanks, madam, for very good introduction on me. Namaskar, respected chairperson, Dr. Sucheta Chattopadhyay of this webinar, and coordinator, Center for Canadian Studies, and Professor Devashri Dotto Rai, and my dear colleagues and friends. Now, I am going to present my research paper on indigenous knowledge as way of survival among the Santal community, reflection from language and law. Indigenous peoples have been getting their increasing share in world civilizations. UN systems support practices of indigenous people for sustainable management of natural resources with their language, knowledge, and beliefs. Resilience of indigenous mode of life survive after facing series of crises and disaster. Skill and tools are part of their cultural identity and social integrity. Of these people live through sharing meaning and knowledge. Several sociocultural identities are formed from cultural diversity. Traditional knowledge system interprets reality through constantly forming multidimensional cycles and as part of complex web of interactions. Oral tradition as form of traditional knowledge such as collective memories of ethnic, tribal, and kinship groups and remain as corpus relating to the whole society. Skills of indigenous people allow for continuity with their way of thinking and experiences. Survivance come through preserve this knowledge by connection through regular discourses with ancestors to maintain a consensus sense of presence of her absence. The Santal is the third largest population among tribes of India. Their language belongs to Austroasiatic group of ostrich speech family. A number of patrilineal groups and subgroups constitute their social organization. They are capable to preserve their age-old cultural tradition even in verge of globalization. Grammatical structures, contexts, and embodied treasures of Santali language were incredible source of research for galaxies of scholars in early phase of 19th century. Dr. Jeremiah Phillips, 1842, L.O. Skerslu, 1873, Easy Man, 1967, F.T. Cole, 1875, Andrew Campbell, 1899, C.H. Bumpus, 1909, P.O. Godin, 1922, and other contributed path-breaking publications as constant impetus to next generation scholars. In 1879, Dr. Graham and Scottish launched printing machine in Benagaria Mission of Bihar and created vibrant web in publication of magazine, books, and descriptions. Then Santal scholars like Viram Hasda, Chaitanya Hemram, Urachand Tudu, Gogla Soren constituted their own tradition. Ramdas Tudu Vesper, Sadhu Ramchand Murmu, and Pandit Raghunath Murmu focused on Santal religion, culture, and literature. Dr. Kumar Suresh Singh stated, the Santal probably been most written tribe in Middle India and they remain most integrated and in most resilient phase of Eastern India. Study of culture, language, and literature became heuristic art by practicing with anthropological knowledge. Franz Bois collected a good number of folk tales, folk songs, and ballads, and created new dimension of study of folklore in America. He also called as father of anthropology in America, or Pope of American anthropology. Edward Shoffley uses language as way of reconstruction of cultural history of a society. John J. Gumpertz applied fieldwork method in this perspective to determine the social boundary and identity. Himes worked with Gumpertz in making sociolinguistics and treated language as a social action. Joshua Fishman bring the notion who speaks, what language to whom, and when. Clifford Geertz, a renowned anthropologist and theoretician and good writer, by his culture as text and thick description, reciprocate the interrelationship between language and culture as well as linguistics and anthropology. Sally Fries established the concept of public folklore through fieldwork. Siliok looks into language as a representational modeling rather than communicative device. Here, I have examined some selected contributions extracted from the oral media of missionaries, administrators, and native scholars on Santali language and law to exploring environment, society, health, and occupation of Santal community. Socio-linguistic approach and interpretive method have been considered for fieldwork experiences and selected literature to understand the indigeneity in indigenous knowledge of Santal community. Concept of habitats and environment bears a rich heritage among Santal community. The Supreme God Thakur planted a number of grasses and trees for prepare earth as a place for man. In Horkoren Mare Apdam ko Rea Kotha, Ramdas Turu and L.O. Spiritual and Ramdas Tutu described in his Kherwal Vangsha Dharamputhi relationship between sun, earth, hill, and rain, created abode of deities to promote welfare of man. The myths described about transformation of animals in man reflect the equality among the man and animals. People offer the body parts of hunted animals to deities for controlling the greediness and remain helpful to maintain the balance of biodiversity. Totemic and taboo-centric religious practices lead them to selective exploitation of natural objects. Seasonal festivals and the cycle of seasonal facts are prescribed to take care of different types of animals and plants, to preserve species, soil, hills, etc. In their golden history, Dalton described 1872. During their rules in Manipur, they maintained rich biodiversity under the leadership of Maharaja Surguja. Consequent migrations were occurred in period from their origin and their consequent settlement in different places. The healthy man and land ratio were prime importance in these times. In their origin, history, and everyday life, we can find good instances for life with nature. For learning indigenous knowledge and values among the Santals, we can examine the writings of L.O. Scripture, Tradition and Institution of the Santal by P.O. Boding, and writings of Ramdas Tudres. Togetherness between living and supernatural objects prevails with interactive relationship among the Santal community. They reflect a great range of resilience through consequent migrations from their origin place, Higiri and consequent 19 places. Religions, parents, and elderly people provide instruction to members of their society. The Adam Pilchura instructed to keep marriage distance among themselves to constitute the social organization through clanship. Clan solidarity is maintained by symbols, rituals, and embeddedness with nature. Creator and protector of Santal community gave clear-cut instructions about good and bad behaviors. Practices with rituals, moralities, and traditional values. Life cycle rituals, especially the funeral activities, express the highest degree of village and clan solidarity. This is elderly persons as supernatural agency, priests as guide and educator. Now we can see the occupation of Santal community. Occupational life among the Santal community reflects all the major evolutionary phases like hunting gathering, plant animal domestication, and agriculture. Thakur went to hunting with his sons. Activities of forest collection by their female counterpart are illustrated. The Supreme God gives them ox, cows, goats, and sheep for subsistence. In 35th chapter of Dharam Katha, that is Kherwal Vangsha Dharamputhi of Ramdas Tutu, description of flower and youth reflect their agriculture-based life. During living in Champadisham, versatile clan-wise occupation like rule and protect the country, priesthood and teaching, agriculture, trade and commerce, entertainment and preservation of culture were practiced. Detailed information about the professions are yet to explore. If we can see to their healthcare system, we will estimate healthcare as integrated part of social cultural life, supported by interconnectedness among nature, supernatural entities, and consequences of everyday life. Religious festivals like Mamore and Eroisim are performed to protect the people from cholera, pox, and other contagious epidemics. Deity update is efficient for avoiding diseases and illness. Good Kamruguru preaches rich heritage of herbal medicine and connected beliefs. Each and every life cycle rituals are also connected with some preventive practices. Reverend P.O. Bodin, in his studies in Santal medicine and connected folklore, 1925, made integrated effort to codify herbal knowledge as well as connected beliefs, practices, and supernatural associations. God Chando created animals, plant, and man. Life persists and can be restored through these components. Unique concepts about human morphology, anatomy, and physiology are available with healthcare ideology. Tejo theory sometimes plays as instinctive role to modern diagnostic system also. It is related to germ causation of disease. Bodin used 4 languages in study of mantra, interpret and illustrate this concept. This also is a impetus to inculcate the scope of comparative religion, comparative literatures also. Another monumental work by Dr. P.P. Hamro, 7th volume Horopathy, advocate its uniqueness from Ayurveda by hot and cold dichotomy about causation of diseases, involvement of supernatural agencies, and uses of animal parts as medicine. Dr. Hamro earned his experiences by traveling through Chotanagpur, Santal Pargana of Bihar, Sundargarh, and Sambalpur of Odisha, and teaching from his ancestors. He emphasized socio-cultural components of this healthcare system and made practicing this tradition to glorify the Santali culture. It promotes the healthy biodiversity, well-being of our native inhabitants. He described 480 plants and he gives the equivalent term from 18 languages, one international English and one national Hindi and other 16 private languages. With mode and purpose of uses, along with this contribution, created compatibility with modern clinical system. Language and lore of this community provides cultural pattern, thought, and actions, ideology and worldview to perpetuate their society and culture. Reminiscence of first days flows in language and act as source for reconstruction of evolutionary pathways. Repertory of indigenous knowledge plays a pivotal role in survival of community, reflect resilience against the challenging situations. Continuous endeavor of foreigner and native researcher keep alive the traditional sources against the vortex of dominant and globalized forces. Researches from the field of socio-linguistics, communications, cognitive and behavioral sciences, pharmaceutical sciences are getting impetus from the Santali study. This is perfect time for validations, reinterpretation and upgradation of indigenous knowledge through advanced research and explore many future avenues with international fame. Celebration of 100 years of Santali studies is coming within few years. Now we may make our planning to cultivate the prospects in forthcoming decades as tribute to our predecessors. Thanking you to all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bui. Any questions or anything else we will leave till the end of the session so that we can take all questions together or comments or observations. Is that okay, Devasri?
This was really very enriching, I think,
Very enriching,
offered us
extremely
possibilities of many questions that we have for Professor Bui. I do have a lot of questions, but I'll ask that later on.
And I would request everybody else to note down your questions so that we can actually get Dr. Bui to address them at the end of the session.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we'll move on to Dr. Colton Murmu, who's an assistant professor at the Department of Santali, Sidhu Kanu Birsa University, Purulia. He has received his MA and PhD degrees from Ranchi University and has extensively worked in Santali linguistics, morphology. He also has a language training diploma from WRLC Pune and has extensive publications in reputed journals in his field of research. He has also been active in community work as a program officer through NSS since 2015. So may I request Dr. Colton Murmu to make his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank Organized Committee, Center for Kannada Studies, Jadavpur University, respected Chairperson Suchitra Chattopadhyay, Center for Kannada Studies, Jadavpur University, respected Devasri Bhattacharya, Center for Kannada Studies, Jadavpur University. Here present our colleagues, Dr. Nivedita Mukherjee, Department of English, SKBU, Dr. Aparajita Hazara ma'am, Department of English, SKBU, my colleagues, Mr. Thakur Prasad Murmu, Department of Santali, SKBU, Dr. Sudhir Bhoi, Department of Anthropology and Tribal Studies, SKBU, Purulia, my dear student or respected guest. In this presentation, I will discuss Santal lifestyle, present scenario. In this presentation, I will discuss Santal lifestyle, past and present scenario. You know that all the ethics of the community in the way of life, food, traditional dress, traditional use things, behavior, even most important ritual, festival, and social life, political life, religious life, and economic life. They are motivated, lead a simple and hardworking or corporate life. Some past and present tradition concept change in the present time. Overall topic not possible deeply in this limited time. So I here basically focus on the Santa rituals and their social life and political life, religions and economic life. Then firstly, I would like to introduce my Santali community. Then Santal are the primitive scheduled tribe in India, residing mainly in the Santal Pargana division and in the western eastern Singhbhum, Hazaribagh, Ramgarh, Dhanbad and Giridih district of Jharkhand. Some of the population was also found in the Bhagalpur, Purnia, Sarsa and Munger division of Bihar state. The Santal tribe also resided in the state of West Bengal, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh and Assam. Some of it also found in the foreign country, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Mauritius, etc. The Santal tribe was called Santal due to its long period stay in Sant region of Midnapur district of West Bengal, which later came to be called Santal. The Santal speaks Santali language, which is belong to the Astrik language family. Santali language was or on script is called Olchiki, that is formulated by Pandit Raghunath Murmu in 1925. According to the anthropologists, considered them to a group belonging to Proto-Australite. The Santals have the three kinds of rituals: birth, marriage, and death ritual. I have firstly discussed my birth ritual. Elderly women from the home or neighborhood often act as a widow at the time of delivery. The newborns placed in the practice of being out, cut of the pointed part of the arrow, and that arrow never will take in the hunting. The Santal tribes has a tradition celebration the Chut Phedao in the or Santal terms, occasion of the birth of infant. Janam Chettiar is celebrated on the fifth day of birth of the son, third day after the birth of daughter. Chacho Chettiar of children in the celebrated before marriage, no age or day is short for this. Thereafter, here I marriage rituals. Marriage is the cornerstone of the family on the basis of which the continuity of the society in the maintained marriage embodies religious, legal, and social acceptance. The Santal is an intermarriage tribe which some title and totem marriage is prohibited. Child marriage is not prevalent among them. Sister-in-law and brother-in-law marriage is social valid. Widow marriage is also prevalent among them. On is talak in Santhal term sakam orage. This is also taken on the basis of immorality, regulations of the live together. In case of divorce, the wedding price is refundable. Here, I following type of the marriage in Santal term Bapla have seen in Santal. Duar itu sindur Bapla, Duar itu sindur marriage, Gulati marriage, Tunki Dipil marriage, Gardi Jamai marriage, Angir marriage, Itut marriage, Nirbolo marriage, Kirin Jawai marriage, Sanga marriage, Gul Lotom marriage, Sange Bariat marriage. In this marriage, most popular and famous three, Duar itu Sindur and Sange Bariat, one is Tunki Dipil Bapla. Nowadays, little bit going to change because time is very short. That's why nowadays going to little bit change. Thereafter, here I discuss death rituals. In the Santal term, posthumous rite or cremation, bone flow, and the sarad are performed. The cremation ceremony is often the practice of the born or bride body in the personal use of the deceased, such as utensils, bows, arms, sticks, musical instruments, clothes, etc. are handed over to the dead body. In the Santal, there is the belief that the soul of that person goes on the Miami world where he need this thing. Thereafter, I here discuss in social life. The Santal social life is a traditional of unique heritage and imagining sophisticated lifestyle. Most notable are their folk song, folk dance, music. About 97% of the Santal tribes live in village. The family form of the tribes is Pritichal property is first occupied by the son, then unmarried daughter, then by strikers. Santal is see both single and joint family are seen among of them. The father are seen head of the family. Santal women are simple and hardworking. Santal women have a major role in the upbringing of children, cooking, fetching water, and editing agriculture and other business activity. In the religious life, the religious life of the Santal tribes is the associate with the belief in many god and goddess and the phantom spirit and the festival. Santal believe that the skill of the person, family or village depend on the mercy of their Bonga, Guru and Hapramko ancestor and deities. Feminine postents, etc. and they are engaged. Therefore, I keep them happy. It necessary to worship them and obtain Santi and the sacrifice to them. Normally, Santal women do not enter in Jahir Than and Majithan. Thereafter, here I discuss traditional political life. The traditional political life of the Santal tribes has been very well organized. The traditional political of the tribes has its own distinct character, through which the emphasis and has been the keeping the Santal solidarity. In fact, due of the emphasis of the Santal tribe, having the accordance of the tribal norms of the value, they are the facility each Santal village, which consists of Maji, Jogmaji, Jogparani, and Godet. In Santal term, Morehor means 5 member. Thereafter, here I discuss in economy life. The Santal economy life is the mainly basis on agriculture. These tribes reside in the permanent village where plowing will the done by the tribes with the help of plow balls. Agriculture mainly depend on the monsoon. Some agriculture area are also irrigated with the help of well, ponds or river and streams. Paddy is the main crops of the Santal tribes. Apart from paddy, is the tribe also product wheat, corn, kendo, arhar, kulthi, mustard, etc. Due to lack of the means of irrigation and the use of scientific method in the agriculture, product is not sufficient. Animal husbandry is also done by the Santhal tribe. The tribal races bulls, cow, buffalo, sheep, goat, chickens, pig, etc., which are the supplementary source of Santhal income. Santhal small things from forest. Santhal tribes earn by collection and selling in the local market. In Santal term heart like a forest fruit, mango, beers, jackfruit, sharifa, canned pears and mahua flowers, cotton, wilt, grease, honey, etc. in the forest. Overall, overall my discuss in this topic, and here I conclude in my topic. Uh, so much nowadays going to change traditional perspective in my present scenario, because present time generation is people very not have time, and another also some need to change. That's why going to change. Thank you all of. Hello.
Yes, I think Shucharita Di, he has
Yes,
finished. Yeah.
yes, Dr. Monmu. Again, a very, very enlightening presentation, and I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from your presentation. We shall reserve their queries and their observations till the end of the session. And meanwhile, we will move on to the next session. The next session will probably, Debasri, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a joint session, right?
Yes,
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 absolutely.
Yes, it's a joint session. The two speakers would be Aparajita Hajra and Nivedita Mukherjee.
yes,
Aparajita Hajra is a professor and head of the Department of English, Sidhu Kanu Birsa University. She is the former Dean of Arts as well. A gold medalist and a national scholar, she has contributed a large number of articles on literary topics in various national and international journals and newspapers as well. She has also presented numerous papers in various national and international seminars in India and abroad, in countries like France, New Zealand, Macau, Malaysia, Canada, New Zealand, Georgia, and Scotland. Oh, New Zealand is there twice. Okay. She has been invited as guest faculty in educational programs on television. She has also been invited to deliver lectures on literature in various universities and academic staff colleges in India. She is the Indian collaborator of the World Shakespeare Project, a global venture initiated by Emory University, Atlanta. She also takes classes regularly with the students of Emory University through video conferencing. She has 4 books to her credit: The Terrible Beauty, Her Hideous Progeny, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, The Brontes, A Sorority of Passion, and The Art of Articulation from Macmillan Publishers. A 5th book on the supernaturalism in films and literature is in the offing from Beowulf Press, Denmark. She has also adapted Shakespeare's Macbeth into a local dialect called Manbhum as a project for performative Shakespeare. Her team won the second place in a contest for local adaptations of classical texts. Nivedita Mukherjee, the second speaker, is professor in English at Sidhu Kanu Birsa University. She specializes in feminist studies, Indian English literature, and Shakespearean drama. Professor Mukherjee has 5 books to her credit, to name a few: Gendering the Narrative, Gender Discourse and Indian English Fiction, published in 2015; Dynamics of Diasporic Identity in Commonwealth Literature, 2013; and The Dark Forces in Shakespeare's Plays, again 2013. She also has international teaching and learning experience. She went for a brief span to Seattle University, USA, as she had received the USA State Fellowship Award funded by the Department of State, USA. She has served as the editor of 2 reputed journals, namely Wesleyan Journal of Research, an international research journal, and Appropriations, Journal of the Department of English, Bankura Christian College. She is working with Teaching Learning Center, IIT Kharagpur, as research collaborator and subject expert in a project titled Graphic Novel Based Pedagogy in Teaching Grammar in Schools, funded by MHRD. Presently, she is also working on an ICSSR funded project titled Folklores and Folk Voices, Preserving the Environmental Ethnospace. Over to you, Aparajita and Nivedita, if I may.
Aparajita Di, you go on first.
I'll go on first. All
Yes.
right. So, like I was saying a little bit earlier, that the two of us, Nivedita and myself, we did decide to present a joint paper, but we didn't really get much time to coordinate what we are saying. So we just, sketchily divided our modalities of speech. So I have my PowerPoint, and I think, Nivedita, you have yours, right?
Yeah, I have mine.
So I shall just share the screen so that I can talk about what I want to say today. And before going on into that, I need to congratulate Shruti Bhui and Polton Murmu and Thakur Prasad ji, who are my colleagues from my university, on those beautifully researched papers. It was a pity that because of technical problems, we could not really hear what Thakur Prasad ji was saying very properly and coherently. But I must really say that Shudip's lecture was really well researched, and it gives me the jitters because what I am going to talk about is not really informed by well-researched analysis and quotations, but this is rather informed by my own experiences as a teacher. I've been teaching in Purulia for 23 years now. First, I used to teach in Nistarini College, which is in Purulia, and now I teach in Shidukanu University. And since Purulia is, a place which is tucked away in now not so back of the beyond, but when I joined here, it was kind of like the back of the beyonds of Jongol Mohol, and so the kind of student structure, the kind of pedagogy that was connected to this region was a little different from what I was doing earlier, because my first job was in Jamshedpur in Indian Institute of Aeronautics, and their teaching was a completely different ball game. When I came over to Purulia, I had to adapt my teaching skills in order to allow most of my students to be with me. So I could understand that my teaching methodology had to be given brush ups and changes every now and then in order to let all of my students into the purview of the teaching process that goes on in the classroom. So I am going to talk about the pedagogical processes and indigeneity. That is our topic today. So how indigeneity informs the changes in pedagogical process and the different problems that students face in the classroom or outside the classroom as well, because it is in an academic institution, it is a kind of interface, a cultural, intellectual, psychological interface that goes on all the time, the entire time that they are there in the university precincts. So I'm going to talk about all those things, and that's why I said that unlike Shudip or Polton, the way they presented well-researched papers, mine is going to be more informed by my own experiences and what I found out in my 23 years of teaching in Purulia. So I have a little bit of a PowerPoint over here, which I'm going to share. Just bear with me while I just share the PowerPoint. Is my screen visible?
No.
Not?
You have to, no. Yeah.
Just
now
give it a little
visible.
time to come up.
Yeah, it's coming on. Yeah.
Yeah, it is?
No, it's
Right.
gone again. Yeah, it's coming. It's
now,
there.
is it there?
Yeah, it's there.
So we are good to go, right?
Yes.
Yes, great. So what I'm going to talk about today is, it's evident from the title, what we are going to talk about, me and Nivedita, reinventing the classroom. Now, the fact that the word classroom is within quotation marks makes it obvious that this is a very loaded term over here. It just doesn't mean a room which is created out of four walls and a desk and some chairs for students to sit in. So a classroom over here is almost a discourse. That discourse which challenges the pedagogical practices through indigeneity. Now, indigeneity is one factor that we have to negotiate a lot when we are in Purulia, because Purulia has a lot of Santal communities which are there as our students over here. So that is there. Now, just some relevant general information which has already been told by Polton and by Shudeep, but just reiterating that in order to contextualize what we are going to say. The Santals are the second largest tribal group. So second largest, which means that this is a force to reckon with. In India, counting about 12 million people in the states of Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, Bengal, and Assam. Now, as we heard earlier, and as we all know, this is one of the scheduled tribes that are there. Now, in Bengal already itself, the number of Santal people is a staggering 25 lakhs. Now, the young generation of India's Adivasi communities, we are talking about the students over here. So naturally, we are going to segregate the young generation of the Adivasi communities, which is kind of like the 40% of them if we take the statistical data of people in the Santal communities who are in the 20s or younger than that. So that constitutes 40% of them. So we dare say that this a large number among this 40% are the make up the student community. So these Santals are chiefly a settled tribe with agriculture as their prime occupation. I am mentioning this because it will come in useful. This has to be stored in our hard disk inside our heads, because this information is going to have an impact about what I'm going to say a little later. So agriculture is their prime occupation, where 53% of them are agricultural laborers. The rest are unskilled workers employed on a daily basis, which means that they get their payment on a daily basis. This is because we are going to talk about the financial problems that students face a little later. A small number of them work in teaching and office jobs. It's a very small, tiny amount, you know, like our Polton is there, Thakur Prasadji is there, and many others like them are there in teaching jobs and office jobs. But that's a very small amount. The most of it is agricultural. Now, according to the Indian census of 2001, 95% of Santals in West Bengal live in rural areas, far away from the urban hubs of education. This is again important because this will impact the geographical problems, the locational problems, the logistics that the students face when they are in the process of in the teaching learning process. Now, in Purulia itself, you know, the students are seldom there based in Purulia town proper, the proper Purulia town. Most of them come from places like Bhangaddi, Chorida, Begunkodor. So these are places where they have to travel through conveyances by public transport and then come to the classroom. And there was one point of time, I'm saying this because there was one point of time when I used to be very particular about when my students are entering the classroom, because it would be awfully distracting and disturbing when students keep coming into the classroom, you know, saying, may I come in, miss, may I come in, ma'am. So I used to scold them. But the moment I understood that most of them are based outside Purulia and they have to, you know, hang on to buses and sometimes even those overcrowded jeep kind of structures that they call trekkers, you understand that you have to be more understanding with them. You cannot be impatient. You have to hold on to your patience. So most of them are coming out from the rural areas into the town of Purulia for their education. Now, we are going to talk about the problems from the students' perspective first, and then I'm going to touch on a little bit from the teacher's perspective. Now, let's take a look at the students' perspective. Now, most of the Santal students are first-generation learners, and that does create a problem, because when a student comes from the family in which the student is a first-generation learner, I think Shunil Murmu is there in the audience today, and he is one of the presenters also. I was talking to him one day, and he told me that, ma'am, the problem is that if we learn something wrong, there is nobody at home to rectify us, because we are the first generation learners. So the academic atmosphere that goes a long way in shaping the academic abilities of a child is most of the time missing in the Santal families. So that creates a problem for the students, first of all. But after the implementation of the Right to Education Act in 2009, the enrollment of Santal students in school has increased considerably, and therefore into colleges and universities has increased considerably. But there is a big but, because the dropout rate is pretty high. You know, I remember that there was one student, I don't know whether any of my students know him. There was this student called Kanu Hashda. He was, quite a little more on the elderly side than my normal students age group are. So he was a little older than most of the students over there. And one fine day, he just stopped coming. So I gathered his phone number from some person, and I called him up and I said, Kandu, ashchish na keno class e? And he said, ma'am, dhan kata shomoy hoye geche. So he was working in the fields, so he had no time. He was harvesting crops. He was busy harvesting crops so that they could be sold in the market and some money would come into the family. So education for him was a luxury he could not really afford at that point of time. So he just simply dropped out of the university. So the dropout rate is pretty high. And once they drop out, they seldom come back. You know, you keep your fingers crossed, thinking that, okay, after the harvesting season is over, the children will probably come back, but they seldom do so. They don't come back once they go. Now, most of them realize probably even after getting some education, that their family land is the only source of their sustenance. So education becomes kind of like extraneous for them. So working on the family land, centering their income on the family land, concentrating on the family land, on agriculture, on the domestic animals that they have at home, that probably gets more importance in their priority list than education does. Now, psychological holdback factors are there as well, even when they are in the university. Like I said, that the university is a place of cultural and socio-psychological interface. So over there are a lot of psychological holdback factors also. Now, the fear of assimilation is something that I have found in them, the threat of assimilation, that being educated, like and doing something other than agriculture, like the non-Santal people, that could pronounce a threat to their indigeneity, the indigenous culture. Now, this sometimes does lead to a break away from tradition. Now, over here, I'm going to give a little bit of a quotation from Boro Baske, whose article I was reading the other day in order to present over here. And it was a very interesting little anecdote that he comes up with. And I'm just presenting that over here. And I'm reading it out for your advantage. An example is, this is Boro Baske in his article, Santal Worries. This is a quotation. He gives you a little story of a person called Mistri Kisku. Now, an example is Mistri Kisku, an educated Santal youth who once came up with the idea to start a barber's shop in our village. Now, there is no such shop in our village, and most neighboring villages don't have one either. The only two barber shops in the area are run by non-Santals, and people have to wait in queue to get a haircut. All of us were excited about Mistri's plan. None of us had ever worked in this profession. A professional barber from a nearby town agreed to train him. But in the end, Mistri shied from grasping the opportunity. The reason was that his mother disapproved of his idea. She spoke of a, Baske quotes this, non-Santal profession, and the young man timidly accepted his mother's opinion against his own interest. Now, this quotation is, I felt that this was important, and that's why I wanted to share this with you, because it's written by a person from the community. So, if like what Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak says, that there can be two kinds of writing about the Adivasis or the indigenous community. One can be Vertreten and the other can be, Darstellen. So Darstellen is when you write from the outside about the community, and Vertreten when you are an insider and you write about the community, that is more authentic. That is often taken as more authentic. So Boro Baske being an insider, and this coming from him, should have quite a bit of credibility to this. That's why I quoted this. So that psychological factor is there. Again, the population is growing fast, harking back to the idea of agriculture, that they concentrate on the land. Now, the population is growing very fast. However, and the small land holdings are getting divided and more divided and more divided, and that's why they are getting more fragmented. And that's why they cannot provide livelihoods for all the members of the extended families. And this is equal to finances to promote education becomes hard to come by. Now, in the lean season, so many young people migrate to the neighboring districts and they go there to work in agriculture or other contractual jobs. Some Santals youths aspiring to work in the collieries or stone crushing factories started by national and international companies often go to Jharkhand and West Bengal and other areas of West Bengal, which means that added to the financial problem, now they are moving locationally farther away from the hubs of education that they started with. Now, moreover, that work tends to be unregulated and informal. Many of them are unskilled. So naturally, they do not get the legal minimum wages that they ought to get. And all this, adds to the financial misery of the Santals. Now, as a fallout, what happens is financial insecurity comes up. Now, here I would like to bring forth a kind of like a survey which was carried out in Jadavpur University by Professor Uday Pratap Singh and Professor Lal Bahadur Singh, and they interviewed a lot of Santal students and asked about their problems. And they said, though there are scholarships to help them financially, the scholarships are not paid in time. Inadequate provision of hostels. They do not have Adivasi hostels everywhere. Non-availability of part-time jobs that they could do along with the studies and thereby augment their income. Inability to purchase all the required books. Now, these are problems that create hurdles in the way of education for a student from the Adivasi community. And then on top of that, there is the threat to meritocracy. We always keep on choosing people with higher cutoff level marks or with a higher aggregates, higher percentages. And in the merit lists, sometimes, these people do take a beating. Now, the fears that are there in the Santal students is biggest one is bias in evaluation in examination, because they are scared of a kind of institutional racism that could happen. Aggravated by the disinterestedness of some teachers in the problem of the students. Some teachers just refuse to be as interested as they should have been in the interests of the indigenous community. So probably they just are nonchalant about it, and that comes across as disinterestedness. Aggravated by the students' diffidence and linguistic hiccups. Now, we come on to, from the financial problems to the fears, we come into another topic, that is the linguistic hiccups. Now, the linguistic hiccups are many in number. Why? First of all, pronunciation is a big problem, and when you're studying literature of English, when you're in the Department of English, this is a big problem. And this is a big problem because the primary and secondary education in the students is normally in the vernacular medium schools, as resources are very meager and they cannot get into the private English medium schools. So fluency in English becomes a big problem, a big hurdle that they just are at a loss to figure out how to negotiate. Now, language is a bar. Because even when things are explained, this also Sunil told me, Sunil Murmu, my student, told me, and I'm just explaining what he said. Even when things are explained in the vernacular tongue, after being taught in English, they are seldom repeated in Santali, and Santali is not Bengali, Santali is not Hindi. So naturally, there is a language gap that happens between the delivered lecture in the class and the understanding of the student. So the encoding and the decoding, in the middle, there is a problem of medium. So when a cow is translated as Goru or Gai in Hindi, it is seldom translated as Dangri in Santali. A tiger is called a Bagh or a Sher, but seldom called a Tarup, which would be easier for the Santali student to understand and therefore identify with the animal being spoken about. Even the alphabets in the Olchiki script, which Pandit Raghunath Murmu brought out in 1925, the Austroasiatic language, as we have been hearing, it's completely different. You know, one example, just like take a look at one example. Now, this script is nowhere near Bengali or nowhere near Hindi or Devanagari or whatever. So the student who is from the indigenous community and well versed with this kind of script really finds it difficult to adjust himself. It's almost as difficult as adjusting to another language, which could as well have been French or Italian or whatever. The conceptualizations in the spoken languages are also different. I'll just give you a small example over here. Like we in English talk about the singular number and the plural number. But that is not so in Santali language. They have a singular, they have a dual, they have a plural. So when they are talking about seta, which means a dog, the singular word for seta is dog, the dual is setakin, and then the plural is setako. Now, so when they have a singular plural dual structure, it becomes a little difficult for them to relate to. Again, another thing that I have found in my years of teaching is that sibilants, making them pronounce the sibilants, are a big problem. And you know why? Because there is a mother tongue interference. In Santali language, the sha, the voiceless post-argular fricative, is just not there. So naturally, pronouncing words like ship, push, delicious becomes a hurdle. And that's why sip, ship, seep, sheep all sound the same. To make matters worse, there are microaggressions. This was what I was talking about in the cultural and psychological interface in the academic institution. And we began the webinar today. We had to begin the webinar today, unfortunately, by mourning an institutional happening that really shocked us. That is what I call by the word microaggression. Students face it too. Institutional racism happens sometimes, and that leads to a kind of social isolation in the student. Now, from the teacher's perspective, one problem that sometimes could happen, my students should not get disheartened by this, but sometimes this does happen. I have seen this. That is, the Santal community is a very close-knit community with a very close-knit sense of brotherhood and clanship with a hierarchy. Like there is a strong sense of boeha. Boeha means bhai, brother, and pera means the guest, otithi, or the other. Marang means senior, and hudin means junior. So there is a distinction between boeha and pera. There is a distinction between marang and hudin. Now, for the teacher, you know, making a crossover from pera to boeha, that can be a little bit challenging at times. Santal students sometimes long for teachers from their caste, a mental rejection of sorts right from the outset that might make the teacher feel like an outsider and might hinder the pedagogical process a lot. You know, there sometimes is a mental block that this person won't understand me. This person is from outside the community. She or he won't understand my problems. So that puts down a wall, you know, that puts down a kind of, it's like the glass ceiling that we talk about when we talk about women and work culture. But here also there's a glass wall, you know, you can see this side and that, but sometimes you just can't reach out. The crossover from pera to boeha becomes a little difficult. But what I would like to round up my part of our presentation, mine and Nivedita's, by just saying just a few suggestions that I have figured out and I try to follow in my contribution as a facilitator to the teaching learning process in the classroom. Now, one is negotiating emotional labor. You know, connecting with the students, that has to be done by the teacher. The teacher has to walk that extra mile in order to negotiate emotional labor. The teacher has to be patient. You know, sometimes it does happen that you are in a flow in the class, you have given a lot of points and you're really basking in the glory of giving them a well-researched and well-informed lecture in English, in fluent English. And then disappointment comes up when a student from the community comes up and says, ma'am, I could not really understand what you were speaking so fast and so fluently that I had difficulty in following what you were saying. Now that should not really make the teacher put off. That should not really, the teacher should not tick the child off. The teacher should be patient and try to find out ways to negotiate that. Interact more with the Santal students. When you interact more, you get to learn more about them. You get to understand their psychology more. You get to understand their fears more. You get to understand what they want more than anything else. So that is very important for the teacher to step off the high pedestal and come down and to the student and understand what the student wants and what the Santal students want. Learn more about the indigenous culture. The more we learn about their culture, the more we understand where their problems lie. We can diagnose the problems, and then we can give the prescriptions, where we can prescribe the remedies for that. So that has to be done by the teacher. There's no two way about it. Retrieve the lost confidence of the child. When the the students from the Santal community, many a times I find that when I have asked them to present a paper, or when I ask them to do something, they will first pull back because they feel they suffer from a diffidence which is informed by years and years of cultural hegemony by the non-Santal community, I would say, and they sometimes feel that they are not good enough. So it is up to the teacher to tell them that you can do it. You are enough. You can do it. You have the same merit as other students do. Yes, there is a linguistic hurdle. We will overcome it together. If there is a cultural problem, we will walk through it together hand in hand. So the teacher has to take that extra initiative.
If I may intervene
So
here for a while, we are actually running out of time for a joint presentation.
Yeah, I would just like to hand over to Nivedita for
okay.
the
Thank you so much.
rest of the, yeah.
Okay.
Nivedita, should I stop sharing so that
Yeah, please.
I shall just stop sharing.
Okay. Have you stopped sharing? It is still showing Aparajita is sharing.
I'll just shut this down. Has it gone?
No, it is still showing Aparajita.
It is still there. It's still there.
Okay. So basically, Shucharita Di, I don't think there'll be a problem because Aparajita Di and me, we both coming from, you can say, one of the metro areas, and then from an English medium background, then going into Bakura Purulia, and I've been teaching for almost 20 years in institutions where every year we had at least 10% of our students who hailed from these so-called marginal groups, though I don't really believe in that. I don't believe in using the term tribe. I don't believe in any of these things which I initially actually came up with, or rather with which I started my teaching career. Initially, when I started, there was a kind of a sense of being a superior, which is a very big no when it comes teaching any students, and that moreover students who belong to a particular community who suffer from a kind of a feeling of diffidence. And as Aparajita said, I slowly realized somewhere the fault was mine. I was going away from the students. So what I started doing with the help of two of my students, one of whom I very proudly say is a teacher today teaching students in a college, and I think she's doing a much better job because she hails from that community. And with her help, I started studying. I started reading about hand.
Nivedita, sorry to interrupt, but could you start it as a slideshow? Then everyone can actually see the
Oh,
slide.
sorry, just a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Start the slideshow,
yeah,
please. Yeah.
I'll start it. Okay, is it visible?
Yes, better. Much better.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. So as I was saying that I started reading more. Actually, in order to teach, you need to be a student first. And in order to teach the students hailing from the Santhal community, with whom we really did not have much of a linkage before coming to teach them, I found it was a big handicap. And as I tried doing these things, the biggest problem was when I started reading how teaching the indigenous population is done in other countries. I found actually it is there are specific classrooms for them, but over here the problem was the 90% of the majority portion of the class felt neglected. So it needed to be done, but it needed to be done in such a way so as to not hamper the sense of not hamper the sense of belonging of the other students in the classroom. So what really needed to be done was actually outside the classroom develop a feeling of trust, mutual trust, a sense of reciprocity. All right. And during this juncture, actually, I happened to be connected with Chotro and Professor Ganesh Devi, and he helped me immensely in understanding and addressing the problems which the students belonging to these community faced, and I as a teacher who was in fact an outsider felt in this. Now, what I will not be highlighting about these further because Aparajita Di has done a very good job over here, but I would like to present two student perspectives as case study. All right. This is a particular student. Of course, I have changed the name. The student, actually, I met him when I was at Bakura Christian College. He was age 21. He was the son of a wage laborer, and he was doing BA from a college where it was a policy that within the class, not a single teacher would be conversing even in Bengali, leave alone the language of the other students. We were not right from the first day. The instruction was, if the students have come to this particular institution, a kind of feeling, a hierarchical superiority. Since you have come to this college, it is expected. In the very first orientation lecture, I remember it used to be said that if you have come here, it is expected you should be able to negotiate your class in English. If you can't do that, this is not the place for you. Good or bad, that is controversial. I'm not going into it at present. But what I faced was that he was very shy and he could not really express himself in class. All right. He was doing a major in English, but he was in a situation, a position where neither in the class nor in the hostel he felt acclimatized with the other students. The result, he was very, very unhappy. He was afraid to ask help from his teachers also because he felt, the moment the teachers started, it was kind of bombarding, all right, a kind of language bombardment. So he felt scared. He was extremely afraid. He did not feel, I can never say he was not a good student. He had done well from the vernacular medium school to be able to come to this institution, but he lost his entire bearing when it came to it. Along with that, the infrastructure. He had come from a village, a remote village where he had grown up in the middle of nature almost. And now in a city where you cannot see many trees, you do not find the greenery around, he was unhappy. So he was afraid. The result was that he was so afraid that he would perform badly that he finally dropped out. Now, next case, this is another student also hailing from the Santhal community, Orpita Hembrom, again name change, age 23. Her father was a government official, so they were very much aware of what opportunities were available. Now, this is also another thing. They were aware of the opportunities which the government presented to them if they could be negotiated, and she had no real problem in following class lectures. She had come from a reputed English medium school where she had actually grown up, and she felt at home, completely at ease. She received scholarship. She knew what scholarship was awarded. The Indira Gandhi scholarship, which is given to the girl child. She was completely at ease with her classmates hailing from other communities. Her dream was to teach in a college someday. However, when I asked her, because the problem is these people who have got the of education, the benefit of if we say the reservation system to a certain extent, and had been able to do well for themselves, they did not want to go back to their community. And until and unless these people decide to go back to the community, the teaching within, the problem of not reciprocating, not receiving what the teacher as the other has to say, this problem would not really be solved. But her dream was to migrate someday to the metro cities. So these actually, over here, I have actually presented the case of two students, but they are not two students, they are two groups basically. All right. So the questions that are raised over here, and it is these questions which I would like all our students and the teacher, actually our colleagues to think upon is what were the challenges that Shagun faced as a student of English major and that Orpita did not face. Now, what support was necessary on the campus to help them in this process of transition, the support that is supposed to be there, but it's in reality not there. All right, it feels bad saying it, but we have everything existing at a surface level. But when it goes deeper down, looking into the psychology of the learner, why the problem, how can he negotiate this problem, this tension of the cultural interface, we fail badly. All right. So what can the teacher or the professor, what teaching strategies can he adapt in the classroom so as to help these students at the same time catering to the other student groups also? So all these problems help us, or rather I think it should make us think as the facilitators of education, the teachers, whatever we call ourselves, and how can these problems, and of course, something that is not in our hand at the policy level of the government, how these problems can actually be negotiated and not just seen as a means of nurturing or garnering the vote bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nivedita.
Thank you, Sucharita.
So, Debasri, we will now move on to, we are still holding on to the questions, right?
Yes, Sucharita. We have the two young scholars who are making a PowerPoint
Yes.
presentation.
Yeah, so let
I
them finish
understand.
and then we'll come to the
Yeah,
questions.
I understand they would be speaking in Bangla, but their presentations are in English. That is what I know.
That's
Yeah,
perfectly all
right,
right.
right. Debasri.
So the first would be Sunil Murmu. As a young scholar, he has been extensively working with the Santali community and has been involved in ongoing research related to cultural identity and representation in indigenous communities. So over to Sunil Murmu. And would you please introduce yourself and say what you are doing, whether you're a student, which level? That would be very nice for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. নমস্কার, সবার প্রথমে সেন্টার ফর কানাডিয়ান স্টাডিজ যাদবপুর ইউনিভার্সিটিকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ আমাকে আমাদের সমাজ এবং সংস্কৃতি সম্পর্কে কিছু বলার সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। আমার নাম সুনীল মুর্মু, আমি সিধু কানু বিরসা ইউনিভার্সিটির 3rd সেমের স্টুডেন্ট। আজকে এই ওয়েবিনারে আমার টপিক হলো সাঁওতালদের জীবনে সাঁওতালি অনুষ্ঠান। এই টপিকটি আমি একটি প্রেজেন্টেশনের মাধ্যমে উপস্থাপনা করছি। সাঁওতালদের জীবনযাপনে সাঁওতালি অনুষ্ঠান সমাজের একটি অন্যতম অঙ্গ, আর এই সাঁওতালি অনুষ্ঠান অনুষ্ঠিত হয় বিভিন্ন উপলক্ষে। এই উপলক্ষগুলোর মধ্যে অন্যতম হলো পারিবারিক উপলক্ষে, ধর্মীয় উপলক্ষে এবং সামাজিক উপলক্ষে। পারিবারিক উপলক্ষের মধ্যে গুরুত্বপূর্ণ হলো একটি হচ্ছে আবগে এবং অপরটি হচ্ছে সাকরাত। আবগে আবগে এই অনুষ্ঠানটি নিজের পরিবারের মধ্যে অনুষ্ঠিত হয়। এই অনুষ্ঠানে মেয়েরা অংশগ্রহণ করে না। সকালে স্নান করে 5-6 জন ব্যক্তি আতপ চালের গুঁড়ো, ধান, সিঁদুর, শালপাতা এবং একটি খাসিকে নিয়ে গিয়ে পূজার্চনা করা হয় এবং খাসিটিকে বলি দেওয়া হয়। এরপর মাংসের তরকারি করা হয় এবং প্রতিটি পরিবার থেকে একজন ব্যক্তি বাড়ি গিয়ে বাড়ি থেকে ভাত ও খড় নিয়ে আসে। এরপর খাওয়া দাওয়া হয় এবং খাওয়া দাওয়ার শেষে ওই খড়গুলি ছড়িয়ে ওই জায়গাতে আগুন লাগানো হয়। অপর একটি পারিবারিক অনুষ্ঠান হচ্ছে সাকরাত। সাকরাত হলো সাঁওতালদের একটি অন্যতম অনুষ্ঠান। এই দিন পরিবারের লোকজন ভোরে উঠে গুড়ের পিঠে তৈরি করে এরপর মাঝি বাবা নদীর ধারে গিয়ে তীর ছোড়েন। তারপর গ্রামের মানুষরা স্নান শুরু করে। এরপর পরিবারের প্রধান সদস্য বাড়িতে এসে পুজো করেন। পুজো করার পর বাড়ির লোকজন খাওয়া দাওয়া শুরু করে। খাওয়া দাওয়া শেষে সবাই মেলা দেখতে যায়। এরপরে আসছি ধর্মীয় অনুষ্ঠান। ধর্মীয় অনুষ্ঠানের মধ্যে অন্যতম অনুষ্ঠান হলো একটি হচ্ছে বাহা পরব এবং অপরটি হচ্ছে কারাম পরব। বাহা পরব এই পরবের দিন গ্রামের প্রতিটি বাড়ি থেকে চাল ও বাচ্চা মুরগি সংগ্রহ করা হয়। এরপর জায়ের স্থানে গিয়ে পূজা শুরু হয়। বিকেল 3টে নাগাদ গ্রামবাসীদের জন্য খিচুড়ি তৈরি করা হয় এবং খাওয়া দাওয়া হয়। খাওয়া দাওয়া শেষে গ্রামের মহিলারা সাদা লাল পাল শাড়ি পরে আসে আর ছেলেরা সাদা ধুতি সাদা গেঞ্জি পরে আসে। এরপর তারা নাইকে বাবাকে নাচতে নাচতে বাড়ি পৌঁছে দেয়। অপর আরেকটি ধর্মীয় অনুষ্ঠান হলো কারাম পরব। এই কারাম পরবটি সাধারণত অবিবাহিত মেয়েরা পালন করে থাকে। এটি তারা 3 দিন ধরে পালন করে। প্রথম দিনে মেয়েরা যে জায়গাটিতে অনুষ্ঠানটি করে সেই জায়গাটিকে গোবর দিয়ে পরিষ্কার করে। এরপর তারা নদীতে স্নান করতে যায়। নদী থেকে তারা একটি ছোট্ট ঝুড়িতে করে বালি নিয়ে আসে আর ওই জায়গাটিতে ছড়িয়ে দেয় এবং তার উপর কুর্তি ছড়িয়ে দেয়। এরপর দ্বিতীয় দিনে তারা সূর্য ওঠার আগে নিজেরা নিজেদের খাবার তৈরি করে এবং খেয়ে নেয়। এরপর তারা স্নান করে বাইরে বেড়াতে যায়। সেই দিক থেকে এসে তারা বাড়িতে সুজি খায়। এরপর তৃতীয় দিনে তারা নাচানাচি করে। এই নাচে কিন্তু কোনো বাদ্যযন্ত্র থাকে না, গানের মাধ্যমেই নাচা হয়। বিকেল 4টে নাগাদ তারা ওই বালি ভর্তি ঝুড়িটি নদীতে গিয়ে বিসর্জন দেয়। এরপরে আসছি সামাজিক অনুষ্ঠান। সামাজিক অনুষ্ঠানের মধ্যে অন্যতম অনুষ্ঠান হলো সোহরাই পরব। এটি হলো সাঁওতাল সমাজের গ্রামের সবচেয়ে বড় অনুষ্ঠান। এটি নভেম্বর-ডিসেম্বর মাসের পূর্ণিমা অথবা অমাবস্যা তিথিতে পালন করা হয়। এই অনুষ্ঠানের আগের দিন ঘর বাড়ি ভালো করে পরিষ্কার করা হয় আর ঘরের যে গোয়াল ঘর থাকে সেইখানে পুজো করা হয়। আর অনুষ্ঠানের দিন একটি খুঁটি গেড়ে ওই খুঁটিতে একটি গরুকে বেঁধে ধমসা এবং মাদলে বাজিয়ে নাচানো হয় গরুটিকে। এরপরে তৃতীয় দিনে অনুষ্ঠানের পরের দিন যে খুঁটিটি গাড়া হয়েছিল ওই খুঁটিটি তোলা হয় এবং ধমসা মাদল নিয়ে নাচানাচি করা হয়। এইখানে আমি আমার প্রেজেন্টেশন শেষ করছি। সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ।
খুব ভালো বললে তুমি। সত্যি আমরা অনেক কিছু জানতে পারলাম, যে এত ডিটেল তো আমরা জানতাম না, সেগুলো সত্যি আমরা জানতে পারলাম। এরপরে আমরা আরেকজন ইয়াং স্কলার আছেন আমাদের, যাকে বলবো, তারপরে আমরা প্রশ্ন উত্তরের সেশনে চলে যাব। আমাদের আজকের মানে শেষ বক্তা আরেকজন ইয়াং স্কলার, তার নাম হচ্ছে সাবিতির Shoki Murmu, a young scholar who has been involved in working from the grassroots with the Santali community. She has been active in research related to indigenous methods of governance and ethical frameworks. Shabitij, তুমি বলো।
হ্যাঁ, নমস্কার। আপনাদের অনুমতি নিয়ে আমি স্ক্রিন শেয়ার করছি।
হ্যাঁ, করো।
সবার প্রথমে আমি সেন্টার ফর ক্যানাডিয়ান স্টাডি যাদবপুর ইউনিভার্সিটিকে ধন্যবাদ দিতে আমার সম্পর্কে কিছু বলার সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। আমি সাবিত্রী শাকি মুর্মু, কানু বিরসা ইউনিভার্সিটির পিজি আর্টস সকলকে আমার বক্তব্য করছি। আমার বলার বিষয় হলো সাঁওতাল সমাজ অভ্যন্তরীণ শাসন ভাব। সাঁওতালরা হলো দক্ষিণ এশিয়ার বৃহত্তম উপজাতি গোষ্ঠী। দক্ষিণ এশিয়াতে এদের জনসংখ্যা প্রায় 7.4 মিলিয়ন এবং ভারতে প্রায় 5.8 মিলিয়ন। সাঁওতালরা প্রোটো অস্ট্রালয়েড গোষ্ঠী এবং অস্ট্রো এশিয়াটিক ভাষা গোষ্ঠীর অন্তর্গত। সারা বিশ্বের অনেক গবেষক এই উপজাতি গোষ্ঠীর ওপর গবেষণা করেছেন। স্ক্রেপসের মতো গবেষকরা সাঁওতালদের ভাষা ও সংস্কৃতির ঐতিহ্য বিশ্বের সামনে তুলে ধরেছেন। সাঁওতাল সমাজ হল ত্রিতান্ত্রিক সমাজ। তাদের নিজস্ব অভ্যন্তরীণ শাসন ব্যবস্থা রয়েছে। সাঁওতালদের সামাজিক ও ধর্মীয় রীতিনীতি এই ব্যবস্থা দ্বারাই পরিচালিত হয়। প্রতিটি গ্রামের 5 জনের ওপর ওই গ্রামের পরিচালন ব্যবস্থা।
সাবিত্রী, সেকেন্ড স্লাইডটা অন করো, দ্বিতীয় স্লাইডটাই যাও। হ্যাঁ,
ঠিক আছে। হ্যাঁ ম্যাম, এসেছি। সাঁওতাল সমাজ হলো পিতৃতান্ত্রিক সমাজ, তাদের নিজস্ব অভ্যন্তরীণ শাসন ব্যবস্থা রয়েছে। সাঁওতালদের সামাজিক ও ধর্মীয় রীতিনীতি হয়। প্রতিটি গ্রামের একজন এই পরিচালন ব্যবস্থার দায়িত্ব দেওয়া হয়। তারা হলেন মাঝি, হয় আছে গ্রামের সর্বোচ্চ পদে রাখা হয়। যে কোনো ধর্মীয় বা সামাজিক আচার অনুষ্ঠান মাঝির উপস্থিতিতেই সম্পন্ন হয়। কোনো সমস্যা মাঝি করতে হয়।
Change the slide. পরের স্লাইডটায় যাও।
দ্বিতীয় ব্যক্তি হেডম্যান, মাঝিকে তৃতীয় চতুর্থ ব্যক্তি হলেন ইত্যাদি গ্রামবাসীদের জানান। খবর থেকে তিনি এই সমস্ত কাজ তিনি মাঝির নির্দেশে করেন। নায়কে হলেন গ্রামের পুরোহিত বা প্রিস্ট। তিনি গ্রামের ধর্মীয় অনুষ্ঠানে পুজো করেন এবং বিবাহের সময় দেবতাদের উদ্দেশ্যে তেল হলুদ উৎসর্গ করেন। এক কথায় নায়কের কাজ হলো গ্রামের সকল মানুষদের তিনি হলেন নায়কে। তিনি অন্য গ্রামেরও হতে পারেন। তার কাজ হলো বিশেষ পুজোতে দেবতার প্রতি তার নিজের কয়েক ফোঁটা রক্ত এবং চাল উৎসর্গ করা। এই পরিচালন ব্যবস্থার সদস্যরা সাঁওতাল সমাজের অভিভাবকের মতো। এনারা একত্রে সাঁওতাল সমাজের লৌকিক এবং পরলৌকিক কাজগুলি দেখভাল করেন। এবার আমি সাঁওতাল সমাজের বিচার ব্যবস্থা নিয়ে বলছি। সাঁওতালদের নিজস্ব বিচার ব্যবস্থা রয়েছে এবং এটি 4টি স্তরে বিভক্ত। এগুলি হলো আত্মবিচার, পুরসি বিচার, মুলুক বিচার এবং ল মহল। বিচার ব্যবস্থার সব থেকে নিচের স্তর হলো আত্মবিচার। গ্রামে কোনো বচসা বা অপরাধ হলে তা সমাধানের জন্য গ্রামের মাঝির কাছে যাওয়া হয়, তিনিই রায় দেন। সাঁওতাল সমাজের বিচার ব্যবস্থার দ্বিতীয় স্তরটি হলো পুরসি বিচার। মানুষ আত্মবিচারের সিদ্ধান্তে সন্তুষ্ট না হলে পাশের গ্রামের মাঝির সাহায্য নেন। এই বিচারে পাশের গ্রামের মাঝি চূড়ান্ত সিদ্ধান্ত নেন। বিচার ব্যবস্থার তৃতীয় স্তরটি হলো মুলুক বিচার। সাঁওতাল সমাজের এক একটি অঞ্চলকে এক একটি পরগনায় বিভক্ত করা হয় এবং প্রতিটি পরগনায় অনেক গ্রাম থাকে। পুরসি বিচারে সমস্যার সমাধান না হলে তা পরগনার প্রধান মুলুক পারগানার হাতে দেওয়া হয়, তিনিই রায় দেন। ল মহল হলো ব্যবস্থার স্তর। সাঁওতালরা যে মাঠে রায় কে গিপিতি টান্ডি বলে। এই টান্ডিতে ল মহল বিচার সভা বসে। এই বিচারে যে হয় প্রাচীনকাল থেকে এখনো পর্যন্ত সাঁওতাল তার ঐতিহ্য বজায় রেখেছে, অন্যান্য সংস্কৃতি এবং আধুনিকীকরণের মাঝেও। ধন্যবাদ।
থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ সখী, খুবই ভালো বলেছো এবং আমার মনে হয় আমাদের ইয়াং স্কলার্স যারা আছেন তারা অনেকটা অনুপ্রেরণা পেয়েছে তোমার থেকে। আমি সুচরিতা দি বলে কোনো কারণে কানেক্টিভিটি ইস্যুস এর জন্য বেরিয়ে গেছেন, নিশ্চয়ই ঢুকে পড়বেন এর মধ্যে, বাট পারহ্যাপস উই কুড স্টার্ট the question hour session. And if there are questions from anyone, first of all, thank you to all speakers for being here. And despite all constraints of time and connectivity issues. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask, unmute yourself and ask. I think that would be a good idea. So if we could start, so should we start the question?
I had lost connection.
We should take bullets.
Yeah, please.
Yes, so questions, please, anybody, please unmute yourself, identify yourself, and please ask questions. Please feel free to ask any questions.
Yes, ma'am, I have one question. I am Shuddhadeep from JUCL, and I had a question for Professor Mukherjee and Professor Hajra. In your presentation, we came to know about, you talked about how the relationship should be between the teacher and the taught. So my question is, as someone from outside the community who is going to teach, how do we perceive who the taught and who the teacher is, and whether creating such a binary of a teacher and a taught would actually benefit in creating the essence of dialogue which we actually want to have, from this exchange. So who is the teacher and who is the taught, basically?
Yes, thank you for this very good question. In fact, this is a space where these binaries are always creating problem. The question you placed today, as I said, the terms I use as I go about this teaching process, I keep on questioning myself whether the terms are really helping us or creating more of a problem, because I felt right in my lecture what I said right at the beginning. I won't call it a lecture really, my experience sharing. I told you that I took help from my students belonging to the community. So I feel at that juncture I was being the taught and they were my teacher. And this binary of the teacher and the taught, not just in this present relation, but throughout life, I think this exists. Oporajita Di?
Yes. First of all, that's a very interesting question. The discourse of teaching learning, that's why we call it teaching learning, because it's a two-way process. It's not always from A to B, but it's always A to B and back from B to A. So that's why we don't use the term, we seldom use the term teacher nowadays. We call ourselves facilitators. The knowledge is there. We just tell the students where to look for it, where to put their fingers. And as far as the indigenous community is concerned, it's always a symbiotic process. If the person, by default, the person on this side of the desk has to be called a teacher in order to identify that person as the person on this side, and the persons on that side are to be called the students, because otherwise we'll muddle each other up. But in actuality, what happens is it's a symbiotic process that goes on. We learn from the students every single day. That's why when I am talking about mixing with the students, talking to them, you learn a lot of new things, And moreover, even if it's not the indigenous community, even if it's that age group that students are in, that age group belongs to another generation which has a lot to teach us also. So it is always a symbiotic process. I believe that.
Yeah, thank you so much. But I also want to ask, because you have the experience, that when you approach the students, when you approach the class as someone from outside the community, or is there some kind of inherent sense of hierarchization, if not in the person who is going to teach them from outside the community, but also a sense of inferiority or something like that imposed or created among the students of the community who are learning from these teachers? I'm just asking because you have the experience, if you could share.
That's what if you remember that, if I may take this question, in one of my slides, I did talk about this outsider thing. Outsider is a very harsh term, but for want of a better term, I'm using this term. But from somebody outside the community, does exist a kind of what should I say, a kind of wariness on the part of the student, that when the student comes into the classroom, he comes with a lot of misgivings, he comes with a lot of foregone conclusions that this is a classroom which will be dominated by people from outside the caste. So the social isolation is sometimes self-imposed also, but it is for the teachers. They will come from they will come with a lot of misgivings, but it is up the teacher to allay their fears and come close to them, and to the proverbial get to their hearts. And you cannot do them if you stay away from them. So you have to, it is for the teacher to isolate those students from the community without really seeming to do so, because that itself, isolating them itself cause another discourse of isolation. So you have to, pull out those students, you have to pay them attention, you have to understand, as a teacher, that is our responsibility. If we do it, we are good facilitators. If we can't, then we are failing. We need to review our teaching process.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. But again, with this, do we again get this knowledge that the facilitator or the teacher, whoever it is in a hierarchically higher position, who facilitates the person from the community?
Yeah, there, if you talk about hierarchy, you have to take it for granted that at least the person who's coming to teach you has gone through a few more educational, what should I say, educational hurdles than the student has, So that person has gone through his master's, gone through his PhD, gone through NetSet, gone through CSC, gone through whatever other interviews are there. And so, if you really talk about, I wouldn't really put that as a hierarchical thing, but yes, that person is a little bit more experienced than the people on the other side. And the age, right?
Yeah.
There's no harm really saying
If
that.
I can
But,
Okay.
If I can butt in just a little, I think I really do not believe in the sense of hierarchy. I just believe in being on two sides of the table with an equal status. All right, it is an interaction. We learn in the process of what we say, and I'm learning every day, and I think I'll be learning to the last day of my life. And that is why what we had a very little time. Thank you for your question. It at least made our position a little clearer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Shucharita, can I proceed with the question?
Krishnendu,
Yeah.
please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Krishnendu. I'm a PhD scholar in the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University, and I also teach at the Center for Canadian Studies. My questions are to Dr. Hajra and Dr. Mukherjee. And since I'm a very early career researcher and an educator at the same time, I would be really benefited by your expertise. This question is particularly for Dr. Hajra, that if you can please tell me that how do I negotiate between the borders of ethical research and covert patronization? How do I actually shed the anthropological understanding of a community which I do not directly belong to? And this is a question for Dr. Mukherjee. It is about how do I ethically validate the onus that I assign myself in terms of telling a community on how to enhance their lifestyle circumstances. How do I ethically validate the onus that I've assigned to myself as a facilitator per se? Thank you.
Okay, since the first missile had been, shot at me, shot at me. Well, Krishnendu, thank you for the question. And I must really say that you really boggled my mind with all those heavy-sounding mouthfuls of jargon. And I don't think I'm really qualified enough to understand that many difficult words, But what I understood is that you're talking about whether it is possible to actually, I would use a very simple but useful term, empathy. So if you can empathize, if you can place yourself in the boots of the other people, doesn't really matter whether you are from the community or whether you're from outside the community. It's the intention, that matters. I'll just tell you one little a small little thing from what I'm doing. I was in the middle researching with the Nachnis of Purulia. Okay, so the Nachnis are a community who are kind of like a little ostracized from the mainstream of life. And I went there. I used to talk to them. I used to sit with them. I used to eat with them. And after a little while, it was not that difficult to understand their life and their problems and what they were all about. And like I said a little earlier, it is always there. Representation is always a very tricky affair. So you represent, if you're an insider, your representation will be even more veritable. But if you're from outside, there might be lacunae which need to be filled up. But that is up to the intention. That's why I talked about the intention. If you want to know them, it is not impossible. So I think that's a lifelong effort we have to give as facilitators.
But is there some very in-hand tip that you can give us in terms of how not to appropriate?
Appropriate what?
Appropriate the community that I'm researching about in terms of representing them, let's say in my doctoral research.
What are you researching on?
I am researching on the Tamang community from Darjeeling, since they are always experiencing this onslaught of their language not being accepted and the language not being spoken. So I'm researching on that.
One thing, because you talked about the Tamang community, and I grew up in Darjeeling among the Tamangs and the Bhutias and the Chetris, So it's good that you talked about the Tamangs. I can only speak from my life. When I was in Darjeeling, when I was studying in Loreto, and I had numerous friends who were only Nepalis, my Nepali was as strong as anything. And culture is something that is very ingrained in you, and it comes out through little things like interjections when you're sad or when you are hurt. It's all if I was hurt, I would say la, which is not a Bengali interjection, it's a Nepali interjection. So if you really give enough time to the community that you're learning about, and if you really try to get into the skin of that concept, it's not really that important. I think you'll get the hang of it.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Krishnendu, what was the second part of your question?
The second part of my question was that as a teacher, how do I validate? We are always trying to validate everything that we're doing, right? Legitimizing. Even while writing a research, we have to look for a rationale, right? So as an educator, how do I validate the responsibility that I have assigned for myself in terms of engaging with the community to tell them how they can work for their betterment?
Yeah, see,
because I do not belong to the community, right?
Yeah, over here, what you are saying is an area about which I'm Toshe actually, like I am always ginger fingered over there. I am not very sure where I stand. I am not very sure whether I really can belong ever. All right, because whatever it is, I'm just trying to do my job a little better. All right. But in trying to do this, never ever can I say I can become one of them. It is not possible until and unless I belong to that community. And where the Santals are concerned, because I have been working on an area recently for my ICSSR project, and I know wherever I go, I usually use my students who are themselves Santals in order to speak to them, to speak to the Santal people. because they are very close shelled where it is concerned. So validating my position, I can only say I'm trying to do my job well, as Aparajita Di said, not with sympathy, not with any other thing, but a little bit more of understanding, if that is at all possible. If that is at all possible. Deboshri is there. I think she will be able to tell you better about this. She once made a presentation at one of the Canadian Center conferences, and over there was a picture of her among the indigenous community, and she was sitting on a red plastic chair. They were sitting on their own local made mat kind of thing, and that red plastic chair, it kind of stuck in my mind as a symbol. That red plastic, something from the outside, something that does not merge together. So all these things taken, I think, uh, I'm just trying to teach English literature that I have been entrusted to do, and trying to do the job, I'm trying to overcome the problems that actually marginalize me from my students. And that is the place where I place, actually, that is the position where I place myself. Nothing more than that. These are areas I am almost, I told you, ginger fingered about.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nivedita.
Thank you.
I think we have a question from Dipanjan, right? Dipanjan
Yes,
Kundu?
ma'am.
Yes, we do.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Yes, I'm Dipanjan Kundu. I'm a PhD research scholar from SKB University. My question is to NM ma'am and AH ma'am. Theoretically speaking, negotiation of language is an exigency. But pragmatically, the Aboriginal students are invariably cooped up within a language community in a classroom which is academically dominated by a foreign language and colloquially surrounded by a language in West Bengal like Bengali. Now, this language barrier is kind of present, always existent, and how to deal with it. Meaning, there is practically there is no way to negotiate or to end up this barrier, this prevention.
Dipanjan, I'll see you later. But that said, all right, that said, I would like to actually oppose your use of the word aboriginal. I'm very touchy again in the use of that term, because aboriginal, the term means not original. But these
Aboriginal. Yes.
people are actually the original inhabitants of the land, where they have been, in a way, they have been turned into outsiders. All right. Yes, I understand what you are trying to say, a language. They are actually kind of negotiating two different language boundaries, if we may say that. Because Bengali, that is also not their language, but slowly through the vernacular medium schools, they are kind of getting associated with it. When I was preparing for this panel discussion, actually, I was going through some research papers, and over there I actually read about many of the students in the Jhargram area, the Santal students, and there were case studies. And over there, one thing I found is that most of them felt at home with the Bengali language. Maybe because, as Aparajita Di was saying, she felt at home with the Nepali language because she grew up in the midst of it. So maybe from the early years of schooling, they somehow get adjusted to it. But that is certainly not the case with the English language. So the problem is there. The problem is means it is of course there, and the problem will stay. I can't say it will just go away magically. That is not possible in any way. But well, things things need to be negotiated, and I feel we are in a little better position. At least empathy is being used in dealing with such students, and who can say, maybe in years when y'all are senior teachers, situation may be a little better. We can only hope, keeping our fingers crossed. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Nivedita. Thank you, Dipanjan. Okay, we have two more requests. One is from Khokon Murmu and the other from Debjani Chakraborty. Let us have these two questions first. Khokon, you come online first.
Hello. Hello, are you listening me?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Okay, Johar, this is Khokon Murmu from Bangladesh. I'm an indigenous rights activist here and working for upliftment of the indigenous community, not only the Santal, but also the more than 50 communities, indigenous communities in Bangladesh. And I want to thank you from the indigenous peoples, all the community from Bangladesh. And this is a nice presentations. And yeah, this is nice that the senior scholar and the junior scholars have a kind of a relationship to the medium as well as to the medium of study. And yeah, I'm very much honored that today's topic is about the Santals. And two things from the presentation I want to draw the attentions of the researcher, that about the administration system and the judiciary system of the Santals. The presenter have mentioned that there are five people in the administration, but if I would like to say that if you elaborate the work of the Manji, there is another man in the administration called Jog Manji. And if you want to elaborate the system of Paranik, then there is a man called Jog Paranik. And if you elaborate the system of the Naike, there is another man called Kudam Naike. So the administration system, there is 7 people total out rather than 5. And another thing, if you come to the judiciary system process, then you have mentioned that Ato Bichar, Percy Bichar, Muluk Bichar, and the law Maha. Rather, I can judgmentally say that if you if you go through the systems of the judiciary systems of Santal, then there is the 4 layer. The first is the Manji Purishad, second is Pargana Purishad, and third is Desmanji Purishad, and fourth is Dhiri. And Dhiri, this is the highest system of the judiciary process. And this particular judiciary, this is actually now this is actually not existing among the Santas people, but the 3 layers, Manji, Pargana, and Desmanji, this is exist. And Dhiri is actually this is a long process, and there is called Law Bir Baishi. This is actually in my sense, both in Bangladesh and West Bengal and Jharkhand, this is not existing like now in Dhiri. So that's my finding part. And yes, I don't know about the research and the particular. I mean the how you could collect the data or focus group discussion or key information interview or other process like the sample study. But I think if we could elaborate the system, both administration and judiciary system, and do more research on it, then it will be good for us, for the Santal peoples. And yes, of course, I from us, from the particular Santal community, and this is a great job and fantastic job. And thank you very much for your effort and for your study. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Khokon.
you.
Thank you for your
Actually,
intervention and
I
also
have
for the
collected from
additional.
ma'am,
Yes.
I want to say something. I have
Yeah,
said
sure.
that
Go ahead.
administration system and judiciary system, and I have collected those information from Rameswar Murmu's Jahir Santarko book. And there I found those. That's why I tell maybe you.
That's okay. I mean, we will all learn other things from such exchanges.
That's
Yeah,
the
So
yes,
whole point.
I'm
That's
sure.
the whole point. Yeah. I think we
yeah. That's
all, I mean, yes, it is. Thank you very much for your
Thank you
intervention,
very much.
Khokon. Thank you so
yeah.
much.
Thank you very much.
We
Thank
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Yes,
not
yes.
complaining, but the thing is that if you get it through from different channel, from different, the book, that's okay.
Yeah.
But
yes.
the thing is
Cross
that,
references will
yeah,
bring in other data. Yes, you are
Yes.
so right.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sucharita,
Devjani, do
Thank you.
you want
Thank
to
you.
come up with your question?
Sucharita Dey, sorry,
Yes.
before Devjani has a question, can I just ask two questions to Professor Murmu and Professor Bhue?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually, I had announced Devjani's name first.
ও
That's why I
আচ্ছা না
thought.
তাহলে দেবযানী
Okay.
প্রশ্ন করো।
Devjani
দেবযানী
করে নিক,
প্রশ্ন কি
then you go ahead.
প্রফেসর মুর্মু ঠিক
Kake?
আছে কাকে করছে দেবযানী?
In keeping with Shuddha's and Krishnendu's questions, I would also like to ask a few questions to Dr. Mukherjee and Dr. Hajra. Thank you so much for your presentation. As you can probably understand by all our reactions that it was quite evocative. And my name is Devjani. I'm a first year PhD scholar in Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. The first part of my question is not quite a question, but I just think that since the Adivasi population has always had a very conflicted relationship with the state, I think one should be, or one invariably is very wary in terms of thinking about census data and so forth. How do you address that? The second thing is, despite the uh, despite one's intentionality and one's personal ethics, often one's gaze is dictated by one's location. I mean, there are people like Jan Vansina who have worked on the field who have talked about it, that sometimes there are slippages where I slip into my privileged position and I speak from that. There are people like Zora Neale Hurston who have said that people from outside my community have done work, but there has always been a problematic angle to that. Also, since Dr. Hajra spoke about Spivak. Spivak also mentions that one always runs the risk of committing epistemic violences against communities that one doesn't belong from. So how do you negotiate with that? And the third thing is, language has perhaps its own nuances of politics involved in it. So why, for instance, in the black community in America is ostracized because what they speak is not the Queen's English but jive. And we all speak English in different ways. We have different inflections and tones. So why speak about pronunciations specifically? And yeah, that would be all. Thank you so much.
Okay, so should I take part of the question, Nivedita? Right. So I am going to concentrate on two parts of the question. First of all, you scared me when you said that our lecture was quite evocative. I hope it was not provocative. So given that, now towards the last of your question, towards the last bit of your of what you said that why concentrate on pronunciation. Now I'll just harp on that part, and then I'll let Nivedita take the rest of the blows. So why concentrate on pronunciation is because unless your pronunciations comes to a negotiable level where you can understand what is being encoded from the other end of the table, other side of the table, you won't be able to decode it. And so communication will fall on its face. And that is not what we are there in the classroom to do. We meaning the teachers and the students both. So in order for communication to be at a viable level, pronunciation needs to be worked on so that understandability reaches a height of allowable parameters. So we are not talking about the British received pronunciation being at the top of its state at this point of time. We are only saying that sometimes, pronunciations pose a problem for the students from the Santal community. I'm saying this from experience because they fail to understand the pronunciation of the teacher, who probably is doing her or his best to talk in the proper received pronunciation of British English. But since the student has not been exposed to that kind of pronunciation, she or he finds it very difficult to follow the lectures, and that beats the entire objective of having a class. That's why pronunciation has to be worked on. Like I said, that if sometimes it so happens that I'm dictating a passage to the students in the classroom, and I say, and his son came over and said, and since I did not pronounce the word son as son and said that it is a son, the student ends up writing, the son came and said, sun came and said. So that beats the entire communicative process. That's why, concentrating a little bit on pronunciation. That part I needed to clarify. The rest is up to Nivedita.
Okay. So, like over here, I will differ a little from Aparajita Di because having started with British English and it having been, driven into us by the Irish sisters who taught us at our school level. When I came to teach in Bakura, I started with kind of getting a feeling almost 98% of the class did not understand what I was saying. All right. So I was at that time in a kind of situation or a mental state where I thought I am right and they are wrong. All right. Because it was just the initial beginning. But as I lived there, and I have been living there for almost 18, 19 years, and having related to the a language, we think of language, something you very correctly said, whether we want to or not, it always becomes we and they. Something that should not exist. It should be a total togetherness. But that again is an utopian concept that doesn't really happen. Okay. So from there, I slowly began to see English as a tool of communication. As long as the process of decoding was done by my listeners, I felt I was doing the job. So, while keeping to the specific instruction of my institution that within the classroom no word should be spoken other than in English, I always told my students that you were welcome in my cubicle. And after this, I slowly found that the language barrier somehow it kind of, it became one. Means the problem, they also got it that I was trying to negotiate a problem from my position, just as they were trying to negotiate a problem from their position. So somewhere we kind of, we made a pact. Somewhere we came together that it needs to be learned, and in order to learn it, I needed that they read the text, they decode it from, because when we are reading a literary text, we actually decipher it from, by referring to the image box, which is culture specific again, the image box in our mind. So once you refer to it, I'm not telling you, you think of it from my point of view. You do your own decoding, but provided that is, at least, there is a critical position to it. What you are saying has logic. You decipher it as you like, and you represent it with your own logic. As far as that concerned, I'm not very
Yeah.
particular about pronunciation. Yes, Devush.
Thank you, Nivedita Dey. Thank you. I actually, because we are running short of time, and I wanted to ask questions for Professor Murmu and Professor Bhui. আমার প্রশ্ন ছিল, দেখুন আমরা যখন এই আয়োজনটা করেছিলাম সাঁওতালি স্টাডিজ হিসেবে, সাঁওতালি স্টাডিজ, আমরা খুব যে বেশি কিছু জেনে করেছিলাম তা ঠিক নয়। একটা শেখার ইচ্ছে আছে এবং না জানার পরিধিটা বোঝারও ইচ্ছে আমাদের আছে। সেক্ষেত্রে আমার আপনাদের কাছে প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে যে এই মুহূর্তে আপনাদের কি মনে হয়, এই গবেষণা যখন আমরা সাঁওতালি স্টাডিজ বলে একটা টার্ম ব্যবহার করছি এবং আমরা অনেকেই এখানে জার্গন ব্যবহার করেছি বা করছি না, সেখানে সব থেকে জরুরি কি মনে রাখা? এক। দ্বিতীয়ত, যে কোনো একজন তরুণ গবেষক বা গবেষিকা যখন যাচ্ছেন একটা ইউনিভার্সিটির পরিধির মধ্যে কাজ করার চেষ্টা করছেন, তাদের কি মনে রাখা উচিত এবং মনে রাখা উচিত নয়, সেটা যদি কোনো, অন্তত সাঁওতালি স্টাডিজ এর ক্ষেত্রে যদি আপনারা একটা প্র্যাকটিক্যাল কিছু বলতে পারেন, আমার মনে হয় এখানে যারা তরুণ গবেষকরা আছেন, গবেষিকারা আছেন, তাদের একটু সাহায্য হবে। মানে আপনাদের প্রত্যক্ষ ধারণা থেকে যদি একটু কিছু বলেন যে কি করা উচিত এবং উচিত নয়, সেটা যদি প্রফেসর মুর্মু আর প্রফেসর ভুই বলেন। কারণ আপনারা একটি ভাষাগত ডিপার্টমেন্টের সঙ্গে জড়িত আছেন, একটা ইন্ডিজিনাস স্টাডিজ সেন্টারের সঙ্গে জড়িত আছেন, এবং এখানে একটা পিডাগজিক ইনস্টিটিউশনাল এন্টিটি আছে, কিন্তু তার সঙ্গেও আরেকটা এন্টিটি আছে যেটা দৈনন্দিন জীবনে আমাদের কাজে লাগে বা নাও লাগতে পারে, এবং অনেক ক্ষেত্রে আমরা সেটা ভুলেও যাই এবং সেখানে অনেক রকম দৃষ্টতা দেখাবার চেষ্টা করি। সেন্টারের ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের সবসময় একটা, মানে সেন্টার ফর কানাডিয়ান স্টাডিজ এর ক্ষেত্রে আমরা সবসময় ওই দৃষ্টতার থেকে একটু বাইরে আসার চেষ্টা করি। আমার মনে হয় না যে আমরা সবসময় সফল হচ্ছি। এমনকি আমার এরকমও মনে হয় যে এই আলোচনা সভার মধ্যে দিয়েও আমরা মাঝে মাঝে সেই দৃষ্টতা হয়তো দেখিয়ে ফেলি। সেখানে কিছু কি সমাধান আছে, যেটা এই আমাদের তরুণীরা জিজ্ঞেস করলেন যে কি এথিক্যাল ডাইলেমা হতে পারে, সেখানে আপনাদের কি বক্তব্য যদি একটু বলেন খুব সুবিধা হয় আমাদের। প্রফেসর মুর্মু, প্রফেসর বুই, যদি একটু বলেন। কানেকশন আছে? হ্যাঁ, বলুন স্যার।
আমি যে মনে করছি এই বিষয়টা নিয়ে অপরাজিতা ম্যাম ভালো বলেছেন, যেটা সাঁওতাল কমিউনিটি, ওরা বেসিক্যালি ওরা ডেইলি লাইফে ওরা প্রত্যেক দিন মাতৃভাষা নিয়ে বেশি চর্চা করেন। সেই জন্য ওরা হঠাৎ করে টেকনিক্যাল প্রসেসে অনেক কিছু যারা প্রনাউন্সিয়েশন এর ব্যাপার, তো ওরা ঠিকঠাক প্রনাউন্সিয়েশন উচ্চারণ হয় নাই। আর আরো যেটা ইউনিভার্সিটি পর্যন্ত যারা পড়াশোনা করতে চলে এসেছেন, তারা স্টুডেন্ট, তারা অ্যাকচুয়ালি দে আর বিলং টু ভেরি পোর ফ্যামিলি। ওরা অনেকে মানে গরিব পরিবার থেকে চলে এসেছেন। মানে এখানে আসে ওরা স্টাডির সময় পায় না, ঘর থেকে আসছে মানে আসা যাওয়ার সময় চলে যাচ্ছে, বাড়ি গিয়ে বাড়িতে অনেক বেশি কাজ থাকে, তো স্টাডি এর খুব মানে সময় পায়। তার মধ্যে ওরা ডোমিনেট হচ্ছে যে ওদের নিজের মাতৃভাষা বেশি প্রচলন আছে, সেই জন্য একটুকু মানে ওদের সময়ের অভাব, সেই জন্য ওরা মানে যারা মানে উচ্চ ইয়াটা যাতে মানে একটু কঠিন ফেস করছে। ঠিক আছে,
ধন্যবাদ। প্রফেসর ভুই, প্রফেসর ভুই কি আছেন স্যার? যদি একটু বলেন। হ্যাঁ,
প্রথম যে কথাটা আপনি বললেন সেটা হচ্ছে যে সেন্টার ফর যে সান্তালি স্টাডি, মানে সান্তালি স্টাডিজের একটা প্ল্যাটফর্ম, এক কথায় যে আপনি করতে চাইছেন, তাতে কোন কোন দিকগুলো বিশেষভাবে নজর দেওয়া দরকার, তাই তো সেটা যদি আমরা দেখি ম্যাডাম, তাহলে অ্যাকচুয়ালি সান্তালি স্টাডিজ যেটা আমরা সুনীতি কুমার চট্টোপাধ্যায় ফিল করেছিলেন যে একটা এর কালচার এবং ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজের একটা ইন্টারডিসিপ্লিনারি স্টাডিজ সেন্টার করা দরকার বা ডিপার্টমেন্ট করা দরকার 1976 সালে। তো আমরা সান্তালি স্টাডিজ বলতে গেলেও কোনো একটা পার্টিকুলার যদি বাউন্ডারি আমরা দেখি তাহলে কিন্তু খুব ভুল হবে, কারণ সান্তাল কমিউনিটি যেখানে প্রচুর হেরিটেজ আছে মানে তার এর মধ্যে, এবং ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ ইটসেলফ ইজ এ ট্রেজার ট্রুভ, এবং সেদিক থেকে আমরা দেখি, কারণ সান্তালি স্টাডিজ যেটা হয়ে গেছে, আমি 100 ইয়ার্সের যে রেফারেন্স গুলো আমার স্পিচে দিয়েছি সেখানে আপনি দেখতেই পাবেন যে বহু ধরনের ব্যাপার কিন্তু এসছে। আমি আর্চারের যদি যে ট্র্যাডিশনালি আর কাস্টমারি লজ কথা বলি সেটা, পিও বোর্ডিং এর যে সান্তাল মেডিসিন এন্ড কানেক্টেড ফোকলোরের কথা বলি সেটা, স্ক্রিপ্ট থিওরির যে তার যে ডিসকাশন গুলো রয়েছে রিলিজিয়াস এর উপরে এবং লিটারেচারের উপরে, এছাড়া মানে মোর অ্যান্ড মোর অ্যাকচুয়ালি এগুলো বেসিক্যালি ছিল আপনার যে কলোনিয়াল যে গভর্নমেন্টের অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেটররা এবং মিশনারিজরা তারা ইউজ করেছিলেন এগুলোকে অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন পারপাস ফার্স্ট। সেকেন্ড হচ্ছে উনাদের একটা ভালো লাগার থেকে উনারা কিন্তু ওই লিটারেচারটাকে স্টাডি করেছেন এবং বেশি জোর দিয়েছেন ওরা লোরের উপর, এবং সেক্ষেত্রে ওরাল মিডিয়া যেটা আমরা এতে কানেক্টেড ফোকলোর কথাটা বলতে বোর্ডিং এখানে বুঝিয়েছেন যে ফোকলোরের যে লোর গুলো আছে সেইগুলোকে কালেক্ট করে উনি কিন্তু সান্তালি মেডিসিন লিখেছেন, এবং আমরা পিপি হেমব্রমের যে ডিসকাশন সেখানেও কিন্তু আমরা দেখেছি উনি কিন্তু ট্রেডিশনাল কালচারটাকে অ্যাজ এ মানে মাদার অফ ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ বলতে পারি আমরা, হাস্কোভিটসের কথা যেটা ভেহিকলস অফ কালচার ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ। তো সেক্ষেত্রে আমরা যদি এটা দেখি সেটাও কিন্তু উনি সান্তাল যে ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ এবং লোর সেখান থেকেই কিন্তু উনারও এক্সট্রাকশন নিয়েছেন, এক্সপিরিয়েন্স। এবারে আমি আরেকটা জিনিস বিশেষভাবে দিকপাত করেছি সেটা হচ্ছে সান্তালি স্টাডিজের মধ্যে আমরা বহু যে ডাইমেনশনের এবং বহু যে এক্সপার্টাইজ রিসার্চার রয়েছেন তাদেরকে কিন্তু আমরা জায়গা অ্যালোকেট করতে পারি, যেমন সোশিও লিঙ্গুইস্টিক্স, আমি কগনিটিভ অ্যান্ড বিহেভিয়ারাল সায়েন্সের কথা বলেছি, এবং আমি ফার্মাসিউটিক্যাল সায়েন্সের কথা বলেছি। তো অন্যান্য অনেক ফিল্ড থেকে কিন্তু আমরা সান্তাল স্টাডিজকে স্টাডি করতে পারি, সেইটাই কিন্তু ইগনোর হয়ে যাচ্ছে। এবং আমি 1950s এর পর থেকে যে সান্তালি লিটারেচার গুলো দেখছি ম্যাডাম, সেগুলোতে কিন্তু আমি বেসিক্যালি যেটা দেখছি যে মানে আমার যতদূর নলেজ আছে তাতে আমি দেখছি যে বেশি করে আমরা অন্য জায়গাগুলোর সঙ্গে সিমিলারিটি দেখতে চাইছি, কিন্তু আপনারা যে ওয়েবিনারটা এখানে করছেন সেটা হচ্ছে ইন্ডিজিনিটি। আমরা ইন্ডিজিনিটির প্রমাণ কোথা থেকে পাবো, মানে কোন কোন কম্পোনেন্টস গুলো আমাদেরকে ইন্ডিজিনিটি এক্সপ্রেস করার জন্য এম্পাওয়ার্ড করছে, এবং আরো ভালো করে বলতে গেলে যে সান্তালি স্টাডিজকে আমরা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল এবং হাই ক্লাস রিসার্চারদের দৃষ্টি আকর্ষণ করতে পারবো, সেই জিনিসটা কিন্তু সেভাবে হয়। আরেকটা জিনিস আমি যেটা লক্ষ্য করেছি ম্যাডাম সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা যে জিনিসগুলো মানে 1950s আফটার যে লিটারেচার গুলো আসছে এবং রিলিজিয়াস টেক্সট যেগুলো পাচ্ছি আমরা ডিসকাশন গুলো অলসো, সেইগুলোতে যে কথাগুলো আসছে, এবং এটা আমি দেখলাম যেটা যে যারা নিজেরাই নেটিভ পিপল রয়েছেন বা তারা নিজেরাই সান্তাল কমিউনিটির মধ্যে রয়েছেন, কিন্তু তারা নিজেরাই সান্তাল কমিউনিটি হয়ে তাদের যে সংস্কৃতির যেটা নিজস্বতা, আমি ছয়ের ক্ষেত্রেও এটা অবজার্ভ করেছি যে তারা নিজস্বতাটা সন্ধান করার পরিবর্তে তারা চলে যাচ্ছেন কোনো কোনো বড় বড় রিসার্চার, কোনো কোনো ডমিনেন্ট কালচারের তাদের সিমিলারিটি দেখিয়ে হায়ার স্ট্যাটাস আর্ন করে। কিন্তু আমার যে আজকের স্পিচটা আমি বিশেষ করে আমি চাইছি যাতে সান্তাল স্টাডিজটার মধ্যে ইউনিক রিসার্চ আসুক, ইউনিক কম্পোনেন্টস গুলোকে হাইলাইট করা হোক, এবং ইনডিপেন্ডেন্টলি যে অ্যাডভান্স রিসার্চের থ্রু দিয়ে, যেটা আমি এখানে বলেছি যে বিশেষ করে ভ্যালিডেশন করা হোক, রিইন্টারপ্রিটেশন করা হোক, আপগ্রেডেশন করা হোক। এটার অর্থই হচ্ছে যে সান্তাল কমিউনিটি এরা সাবজেক্ট হোক, এরা রিসার্চ এরিয়া হিসেবে থাকুক এই সমস্ত রিসার্চারদের কাছে এবং এই সমস্ত ডিসিপ্লিন গুলোর কাছে, যার মাধ্যমে আমরা ভবিষ্যতের সান্তাল স্টাডিজের একটা অন্য ধারা খুঁজে পাবো। এবং আপনি যদি ম্যাডাম সান্তাল স্টাডিজের একটা সেকশন খুলতে চান, আপনার সেন্টার ফর কানাডিয়ান স্টাডিজ হোক,
না ঠিক সেন্টার না, কারণ আমাদের গবেষণা পরিধিটা আমরা বাড়াবার চেষ্টা করছি, সেই অর্থে যদি বলে, মানে ইনস্টিটিউশনাল সেন্টার হিসেবে না।
ঠিক ম্যাডাম, তো সেটা তো আমি মানে বলেইছি আমার স্পিচে। তাছাড়াও আপনি প্রাথমিকভাবে যেটা ভাবতে পারেন সেটা হচ্ছে একদম পরিষ্কারভাবে সোশিও লিঙ্গুইস্টিক অ্যাপ্রোচ, বা যেটা আমরা অ্যানথ্রোপোলজি অফ ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ বা আপনি লিঙ্গুইস্টিক্স অ্যানথ্রোপোলজি যেগুলো রয়েছে সেগুলো আপনি বিশেষভাবে একটু দেখুন, যেটা আপনার ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ এবং লিটারেচারের খুব কাছাকাছি থেকে সান্তাল কালচারটাকে আপনারা বুঝতে পারবেন। আর সেকেন্ড যেটা হচ্ছে ম্যাডাম, সেটা হচ্ছে যেমন এই যে আমরা ফোকলোরটা বেশি করে জোর দেওয়া দরকার। আপনি কম্পারেটিভ লিটারেচারের কথা যেখানে আপনারা কাজ করছেন, রিসার্চ করছেন, সেক্ষেত্রে আমরা কেন শুধুমাত্র ভাষার ট্রান্সলেশন বা এক ভাষা থেকে আরেক ভাষা এইটার মধ্যে সীমাবদ্ধ থাকবো নিজেদেরকে? কেন আমরা ভাবের ট্রান্সলেশন করবো না? আমরা শুধুমাত্র সিমিলারিটি ডিসিমিলারিটির মাধ্যমে করে যদি থেমে যাই তাহলে কিন্তু আসল কাজটা করা হচ্ছে না। এই সিমিলারিটি ডিসিমিলারিটি কম্পারিজন এর মাধ্যমে উঠে আসুক যে সান্তালি ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে কি কি ইউনিকনেস গুলো রয়েছে। যেমন কিছুটা আমি গ্রামাটিক্যাল ইউনিকনেস গুলোর কথা বলেছি। গ্রামাটিক্যাল ইউনিকনেস যদি না থাকতো ম্যাডাম, তাহলে আমরা ওই যে ফিলিপ বা স্ক্রিপফোর্ড বা বোর্ডিং তাদের আপনি যদি ম্যাডাম ওইগুলো লক্ষ্য করেন, ওনাদের যে ইয়েগুলো মানে পাবলিকেশন গুলো, পরিষ্কার ভাবে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে প্রত্যেকেই কিন্তু গ্রামার নিয়ে লিখেছেন। আপনি বলুন ম্যাডাম 100 বছর আগে উনাদের কি প্রয়োজন ছিল? প্রথমে ওনারা সান্তালি গ্রামার নিয়ে ওনারা বইগুলো লিখে গেছেন পরপর, এবং বোর্ডিং যে সান্তালি ডিকশনারি লিখেছেন এবং আপনার স্ক্রিপচারও তিনি ডিকশনারি লিখেছেন। তাহলে আমরা প্রচুর পরিমাণে এগুলো পাচ্ছি। তো এই যে গ্রামার এবং যে মানে লিঙ্গুইস্টিক যে ভিউ পয়েন্ট এবং তার রিসার্চ, সেটা কিন্তু হারিয়ে গেছে। আমি কলোনিয়াল পিরিয়ডের পর থেকে আর সেইভাবে ভালো গ্রামার লেখা হচ্ছে, বা ওই যেমন আপনি যেমন ধরুন রিসলের যে এটা রেসিয়াল ক্লাসিফিকেশন এবং ডাল্টনের যে ট্রাইব কাস্ট অফ বেঙ্গল এবং হুটনের যে রিসার্চ গুলো রয়েছে তার উপরে মানে একদম এমন ইউনিক রিসার্চ আমরা পাচ্ছি না যেগুলোকে ডাইরেক্ট চ্যালেঞ্জ করছে, কিন্তু আমরা ওইগুলোর কমপ্লিমেন্টারি কিছু কিছু তো পাচ্ছি, যার ফলে জিনিসটা আমরা মানে মোর এডিশন হচ্ছে, সেই মানে এক্সপেক্টেড লেভেলে না হলেও কিছুটা হচ্ছে। তো তাই যদি হয় তাহলে আমার এই সান্তালি গ্রামার, সান্তালি ডিকশনারি এইগুলোতে কেন আমাদের তার পরবর্তী ধাপের রিসার্চ গুলো হচ্ছে না? আমার মনে হয় ম্যাডাম আপনারা যদি সান্তালি স্ট্র্যাটেজির উপরে ফোকাস করতে চান তাহলে প্রিলিমিনারি, যেহেতু আপনারা সেন্টারের অতটা বড় ব্যাপারের দিকে যাচ্ছেন না, তাহলে কিন্তু আপনাদের ওই বিশেষ করে 1930 সাল থেকে শুরু করে 1940 সালের মধ্যে 1930 থেকে 40 এবং পরবর্তী 40 থেকে 50 এই 20 বছরের যে টেক্সট গুলো সান্তালি এর মধ্যে হয়েছে মানে লেখা হয়েছে, যে পাবলিকেশন গুলো হয়েছে, এইগুলোকে আপনারা ভালো করে স্টাডি করুন এবং স্টুডেন্টদের করান। এইগুলোকে ভালো করে স্টাডি করার পরে আপনাদের যে মানে রিসার্চ এরিয়াগুলো এবং টিচিং এরিয়াগুলো ম্যাচ করছে, আপনারা ফার্স্ট ওই এরিয়াগুলোতে ফোকাস করুন। নেক্সট ওই এরিয়াগুলো ফোকাস করার পরে তারপরে আপনারা ধীরে ধীরে ওইটা পুরো কভার করার পরে আপনারা সান্তালি স্ট্র্যাটেজির যে বৃহত্তর যে পরিসর রয়েছে সেটার দিকে ধীরে ধীরে যেতে থাকবে। এবং অন্যান্য স্কলাররা যত আসবে, যেমন ধরুন আমরা ফার্মাসিউটিক্যাল সায়েন্সেস থেকে বলেছি, কেন বলেছি? কারণ সান্তালি মেডিসিন, পিওবোর্ডিং এবং পিপি হেমব্রমের যে টেক্সট সেইগুলোতে হিউজ পরিমাণ ইনফরমেশন পড়ে আছে, যেগুলো আমি একবার যাদবপুরে আপনাদের ওই যে ন্যাচারাল সায়েন্সের ডিপার্টমেন্ট আছে, তো ওখানে যে ইথনো ফার্মাকোলজি ছিল একটা ওই মানে সেমিনার অ্যাটেন্ড করেছিলাম, সেখানে ওনারা বলেছিলেন যে এই ওরাল মিডিয়াতে যে সমস্ত ইনফরমেশন গুলো আছে ট্রাইবাল মেডিসিন সম্পর্কে, ইন্ডিজিনাস মেডিসিন, মোরলে সবগুলো নাকি স্টাডি করা হয়ে গেছে। তো এই ব্যাপারটাতে আমি যাচ্ছি না, কিন্তু আমি যেটা বলতে চাইছি সেটা হচ্ছে এই জিনিসগুলোতে সান্তাল কমিউনিটির যে কমিউনিটি রিসোর্সের রাইট যেটা রয়েছে, তো ইন্টেলেকচুয়াল প্রপার্টি রাইট, এগুলোকে মেনটেন হয়েছে প্রপারলি। তাহলে এই জিনিসগুলো হ্যাঁ ম্যাডাম, আমি বলছি যে ফার্মাসিউটিক্যাল সায়েন্সেস, ক্লিনিক্যাল সায়েন্সেস এবং বায়োলজিক্যাল সায়েন্সেস যে দিকগুলো রয়েছে, তো এই সমস্ত দিকগুলো রিসার্চাররা যত আসবেন সাঁওতালি স্টাডিজে তত কিন্তু সম্ভাবনা দিকগুলো খুলে যাবে। আর যেটা মুশকিল হয়ে গেছে সেটা এক তো হচ্ছে বিশাল একটা গ্যাপ ম্যাডাম, মানে বিশাল গ্যাপ ইন দ্য সেন্স মানে যেখানে বোর্ডিং এবং আমার আর্চার বা এরা ছেড়ে গেছেন সেই জায়গাগুলোর পর থেকে তো আর মানে ডেভেলপমেন্ট হয়ইনি, পরন্তু পরের রিসার্চার গুলো আমার ব্যক্তিগত ধারণায় অনেক ক্ষেত্রে মিসগাইড হয়েছে। তো এইটা শুধুমাত্র আপনি কম্পারেটিভ লিটারেচার ডিপার্টমেন্ট শুধুমাত্র আপনি যদি ওই করেন মানে সেন্টার ফর কানাডিয়ান স্টাডিজ থেকেও কোনো কাজ করেন, তো এই কাজগুলো করার সময় যদি আপনি বিশেষভাবে লক্ষ্য করেন এবং যত্নশীল হন তাহলে ম্যাডাম আমার মনে হয় আপনাদের সেন্টার এবং আপনাদের যে সাঁওতালি স্টাডিজের যে আপনারা প্রয়াস করেছেন এটা অনেকটা ভালো জায়গায় চলে যাবে।
ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে, অনেক অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ এই অ্যাডভাইস দেওয়ার জন্য, এবং আপনার অনেক দিনের শেখার থেকে কিছু মুহূর্ত 5 মিনিটের মধ্যে দেওয়া তো সম্ভব নয়, সুতরাং আপনাকে আর প্রফেসর মুর্মুকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ। আমরা অনেকটা সময় পেরিয়ে এসেছি, আর কারো কি কোনো প্রশ্ন আছে নাকি আর we should call it a day? আর যদি কারো কোনো প্রশ্ন না থাকে I think সেটা ঠিক আছে। হ্যাঁ, thank you so very much. So on the behalf of the Center for Canadian Studies, thank you everyone for being here with us, for your questions, for your interactions. Professor Hajra, Professor Mukherjee, Professor Buri, Professors Murmu, and the young scholars Shobit Kich and Sunil. Thank you so very much for making this possible. Thank you to all colleagues at SKBU and also colleagues at JU and also from elsewhere, from Bangladesh even, as we can see. Thank you so much for being here. We are hoping to have a continued series of webinars. The next one will be on the 24th. It's scheduled on the 24th on Boro Studies. So we hope to see some of you there again. So thank you very much. Have a good night. And thank you so very much for the wonderful interactive session. Thank you so much.
And I would also like to extend my thanks to Sucharita Di, she has left now, for having us over. It's been a very wonderful and enlightening experience, and it's very heartening to see people working so passionately about these fields, you know. So Devashri, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye. Namaskar.
Thank you. Bye.
Namaskar. Thank you.